The champagne flutes caught the light like tiny daggers. Roxy stood at the center of the Jade Spire ballroom, 7 months pregnant, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's weddings. Cameras flashed. Donors smiled. Everyone wanted a piece of Boss Quan's beautiful, glowing wife. His hand rested on her lower back. Too tight. Always too tight. She'd learned not to flinch. Flinching made him squeeze harder. So she smiled instead, the practiced, perfect smile that made photographers lean in closer, that made society writers describe her as radiant and devoted. Nobody saw the fingerprint bruises hidden under silk. Have you ever smiled so hard your face hurt, knowing one wrong move would ruin everything? The ballroom hummed with wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped from vaulted ceilings. Servers in black uniforms glided between guests carrying trays of imported delicacies. Quan's empire was on full display tonight. Every politician he owned, every business partner he controlled, every criminal connection wrapped in designer suits. And Roxy was the centerpiece, the proof that monsters could love. Except he didn't. She knew that now. The realization had come slowly, like poison seeping through cracks. It started with small things, forgotten anniversaries, phones turned face down, late nights that smelled like unfamiliar perfume. Then bigger things. Her friends mysteriously stopped calling, job offers that vanished after he made a few calls, bank accounts she couldn't access without his permission. By the time she understood what was happening, the cage had already locked. Smile wider, darling. Quan's breath was hot against her ear. Donors are watching. She obeyed. A flash of movement caught her peripheral vision. A woman entering through the south entrance, dressed in crimson that cut through the sea of black tuxedos and pastel gowns like a blade. Long dark hair, predatory walk, eyes that found Quan across 50 feet of marble floor and held. Suki Min. Roxy's stomach dropped. She'd met Suki twice before. Once at a business dinner where Suki's hand lingered too long on Quan's shoulder, and once at the penthouse when Quan claimed she was dropping off contracts. Both times, Suki had looked at Roxy the way someone examines furniture they're planning to replace. Quan's grip loosened. His attention shifted. For 3 seconds, Roxy didn't exist. She watched her husband's eyes track Suki across the room, watched his jaw tighten, watched him excuse himself from the conversation mid-sentence, leaving Roxy standing alone with a circle of confused investors. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. Unknown number. She opened it with trembling fingers. You deserve better than this. Her breath caught. She looked around, searching for whoever sent it, but everyone was smiling, laughing, pretending not to notice Boss Quan disappearing into the shadows with another woman. Another text. Check his phone. Tonight. 2 Uhr nachts. Roxy's pulse hammered in her temples. She knew she shouldn't. Knew that looking would confirm things she wasn't ready to face. But her thumb was already moving, already typing back. Who is this? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. The gala continued around her, like a performance she was no longer part of. She smiled when people approached, nodded when they congratulated her on the pregnancy, laughed when someone made a joke about cravings. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time in 3 years, Roxy stopped performing and started paying attention. Hours later, the penthouse was silent. Quan had come home at 1:47 a.m., reeking of Suki's signature jasmine perfume. He'd muttered something about paperwork and collapsed in a bed without looking at her. Roxy lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, feeling their daughter kick against her ribs. His phone sat on a nightstand. Charging. Unlocked. 2 Uhr 3 nachts. Her hand reached out, before her brain could stop it. The screen lit up her face in the darkness. Dozens of messages, all from Suki. Tonight, Jade Spire, 2 Uhr nachts. She looked pathetic standing there alone. When are you getting rid of her? Pregnancy makes women useless. You know that. I'll be waiting. Roxy's vision blurred. Her hand shook so violently, she almost dropped the phone. She kept scrolling. Kwan's response, soon. I'm handling it. The baby kicked again. Harder this time. As if she knew. Roxy set the phone back exactly where she found it. Slid out of bed. Walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Serum's neon skyline. The city glittered beneath her like broken glass. What would you do if you discovered the person you trusted most was planning to erase you? She pressed her palm against the cold window. Tomorrow, everything would change. She just didn't know how much. Suki Min didn't believe in love. She believed in leverage. From her corner booth at the Crimson Lounge, Kwan's private club where deals were made and secrets were buried, she watched him enter with that same swagger he'd worn the night they met. Expensive suit, cold eyes, the kind of man who thought owning things made him powerful. He had no idea she was about to own him. You're late. She didn't look up from her phone, letting him come to her. Men like Kwan needed to feel like they were chasing. The moment you seemed too eager, they lost interest. Had to deal with something at home. He slid into the booth across from her, loosening his tie. She's becoming a problem. She, not Roxy, not my wife. Just she. Suki finally looked up, slow and deliberate. A problem how? Emotional, needy, crying about everything. Kwan signaled for whiskey. Pregnancies made her unbearable. Suki had been planting those seeds for months. Every conversation, every carefully chosen word designed to make Roxy seem like a burden instead of a person. It was almost too easy. Have you ever watched someone throw away something valuable because you convinced them it was worthless? She leaned back, letting silence do the work. Kwan hated silence. It made him uncomfortable, made him fill the space with confessions he'd regret later. I need her gone, he said finally. But the optics, Suki interrupted, her voice smooth as poison, only matter if people think you're the villain. Was she left on her own? His eyes narrowed. Interested, she continued. What if the stress became too much? What if she realized she wasn't cut out for this life? What if she simply disappeared one night and everyone felt sorry for you? Kwan's jaw worked. She could see his mind turning, calculating how to rewrite the narrative so he emerged as the victim instead of the villain. People would talk, he said. Let them. Suki reached across the table, her fingers brushing his wrist. Your boss, Kwan. You survived worse than gossip. What he didn't know, Suki didn't care about him, didn't care about Roxy, didn't care about any of this except the end game she'd been building since the day a rival syndicate offered her 3 million won to destabilize the Ryu Empire from the inside. Seduce the boss, turn him against his wife, create chaos, walk away rich. Simple. Except nothing about Roxy was simple. 3 weeks earlier, Suki had done her homework. Every successful manipulation started with research. You couldn't break someone without knowing exactly where the cracks were. She'd hired a private investigator, off the books, untraceable, to dig into Roxana Kwan's background, expecting nothing interesting, expecting a basic profile, middle-class upbringing, decent education, the kind of woman who fell for powerful men because she craved security. What she found instead made her pause. Roxana Steele. That was Roxy's maiden name. Steele. The investigator's report sat open on her laptop now, in her apartment overlooking the river. She reread the section that had caught her attention. Subject changed name from Roxana Steele to Roxana Kwan upon marriage 3 years ago. Birth records indicate parents deceased. Multiple sealed files related to family estate. No criminal record. No significant digital footprint before age 22. Steele. Why did that name feel familiar? Suki scrolled through her contacts, her networks, her mental catalog of power players in CRM's underworld. She'd heard that name somewhere. Knew she had. But where? She pulled up a secondary search. Steele plus CRM plus business. Pages of results. Most generic. Steel manufacturing companies. Construction firms. Nothing that connected. Then one result, buried on page 6. An old Business Journal article from 2010 about invisible investors in Southeast Asian markets. One paragraph mentioned a holding company called Steel Conglomerate, described as notoriously private and untraceable. Suki's instincts prickled, but she dismissed it. Probably a coincidence. Common last name. Roxy didn't act like someone connected to serious money. She acted small, uncertain, exactly the kind of woman who'd let herself be controlled. Wrong place to stop digging, Suki. She closed the file and refocused on what mattered, finishing the job. The rival syndicate was getting impatient. They wanted Kwan's empire fractured within 6 months. She was already 4 months in. Time to accelerate. Back at the Crimson Lounge, Kwan's whiskey arrived. He downed it in one swallow. What are you suggesting? Suki tilted her head, studying him the way a chess player studies the board 3 moves ahead. I'm suggesting you stop seeing her as your wife and start seeing her as a liability. Liabilities get cut. She's 7 months pregnant. Even better. Suki's smile didn't reach her eyes. Who's going to fight back when they're that vulnerable? Would you trust someone who talks about human beings like objects to be discarded? Comment if you've ever dealt with someone this cold. Kwan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. A message from someone named Baron Lee. He typed a response and set it face down on the table. Suki had already memorized the first few words. Enough to know Baron was getting nervous about something. Another crack forming in Kwan's foundation. Perfect. I'll handle it this week, Kwan said finally, his voice flat. Decided. She'll be gone by Friday. Suki raised her glass. To new beginnings. He clinked his against hers. Unaware, he was toasting his own destruction. Because what Suki hadn't told him. She'd been recording every conversation they'd had for the past 4 months. Every cruel comment. Every plan. Every moment of betrayal. Insurance. For when the time came to cash out and vanish. She watched Kwan leave the lounge, shoulders squared, convinced he was in control. Men like him always thought they were in control. Right up until the moment they realized they never were. Suki pulled out her phone and sent a message to her contact at the rival syndicate. It's happening. He's ready to move. Prepare for phase 2. 3 dots appeared. Then, confirmed. Payment authorized upon completion. Suki pocketed the phone and ordered another drink. By next week, Boss Kwan would have nothing. And Roxy? Well, Roxy was just collateral damage. At least, that's what Suki believed. She had no idea how wrong she was. What do you think of Suki? Drop villain if you think she's pure evil, or survivor if you think she's just doing what she has to. I'm curious where you stand. Roxy had prepared his favorite meal. Pathetic, she knew. But some part of her, the part still clinging to the fantasy that marriage meant partnership, thought maybe food could soften whatever was coming. She'd spent 2 hours in the kitchen, her swollen feet aching, chopping vegetables while their daughter kicked restlessly against her ribs. The dining table was set. Candles flickered. The penthouse smelled like garlic and desperation. Quan walked past it all without glancing. "We need to talk." His voice was surgical, cold, the voice he used when firing employees. Roxy's hands instinctively moved to her belly. Protective. About what? "Sit down." She didn't sit. Her body knew before her mind did. Sitting meant submission. Sitting meant accepting whatever verdict he'd already decided. The elevator chimed behind them. Roxy turned. Suki stepped out, heels clicking against marble. She wore black, head to toe, like she was attending a funeral. In her right hand, she carried something that caught the candlelight. Golden scissors. Have you ever felt the exact moment your life changed and been powerless to stop it? "Quan." Roxy's voice cracked. "What's happening?" He didn't answer, just moved behind her, blocking her path to the elevator. She was core between the dining room and the windows, 50 floors of empty air on one side, 2 predators on the other. Suki circled her slowly, appraising. "You really thought this would last forever, didn't you?" Roxy's pulse hammered at her throat. "I don't understand." "Your hair." Suki's smile was razor thin. "It's beautiful. Everyone always comments on it. How long? How shiny? How perfect?" The scissors opened, then closed. A sharp, metallic sound that echoed in the silence. "Quan, please." Roxy backed against the window, hands up, pleading. "Whatever I did wrong, we can fix it. Just tell me. You didn't do anything wrong." Quan's voice came from behind, emotionless as winter. "You were just never right." Suki grabbed Roxy's hair, thick, dark waves that fell past her shoulders, and pulled her head back. Hard. Roxy gasped but didn't scream. Screaming felt useless, like begging a storm to stop. The first cut severed 6 inches. Roxy's eyes flooded, but she bit her lip, tasting copper. Their daughter kicked violently, sensing her mother's terror. "This is what happens," Suki whispered near her ear, breath hot and cruel. "When you become inconvenient." Snip! Another chunk fell. Quan watched from the doorway, arms crossed. Not stopping it. Not participating. Just allowing. That was worse somehow. The permission. The indifference. Suki worked methodically, cutting uneven chunks, destroying 3 years of growth in under 2 minutes. Hair scattered across marble floors like evidence of something murdered. When she finished, Roxy's reflection in the window showed a stranger. Jagged edges, exposed neck, eyes hollow with shock. "Better," Suki said, stepping back to admire her work. "Now you look like what you are." "And what's that?" Roxy's voice barely functioned. "Temporary." The word hit like a fist. Quan finally spoke. For words. Delivered with the same tone he'd used to order coffee. "You no longer needed." The rain started the moment they threw her out. Not gently. Not with any ceremony. Quan grabbed her arm, dragged her to the elevator, and shoved her inside. Suki pressed the button for the ground floor and waved, fingers wiggling like she was saying goodbye to a child. The doors closed on Roxy's ruined reflection. She rode down in silence, watching floor numbers descend. 50, 40, 30, each number a countdown to something she couldn't name yet. Grief, rage, transformation, ground floor. The elevator opened onto the back alley, Neon Street and 9th, where the city's underbelly breathed. This wasn't the front entrance where doormen smiled and cars waited. This was where trash got discarded. She stumbled onto wet pavement, rain immediately soaking through her thin dress. No code, no phone, no, wait, her clutch, still gripped in her shaking hand. She opened it with numb fingers. Phone, wallet, keys to an apartment she could no longer access. Behind her, the service door slammed shut, locked from the inside. Roxy stood at the intersection, Rain plastering chopped hair against her skull, 7 months pregnant, wearing a dress worth thousands while surrounded by people who had nothing. A man leaning against the alley wall watched her. "You lost, lady." She didn't answer. Couldn't. Her throat had closed around words too big to speak. The neon signs buzzed overhead, red, blue, green, casting chemical colors across puddles. This corner was known for three things: drug deals, disappearances, and people the city forgot existed. If you were abandoned in the worst part of town, 7 months pregnant and alone, who would you call? Roxy opened her phone with trembling hands. Battery at 23%. She scrolled through contacts. Jinx. Echo. Kat. Her friends from the past 3 years. The ones who'd slowly stopped texting back, stopped inviting her out, stopped existing in her life. All blocked. Every single one. Quan had erased her systematically, methodically, probably months ago. She kept scrolling, vision blurred by rain and tears she refused to let fall. Then, a name she hadn't seen in 3 years. Titan, her eldest brother. Her finger hovered over the contact. Pride warred with survival. She'd left them, ignored their warnings, cut them off because Quan convinced her they were controlling and didn't understand real love. What if they'd moved on? What if they hated her? What if their daughter kicked hard? Reminder, she wasn't just making this decision for herself anymore. Roxy pressed the message icon, hands shaking so violently she could barely type. Titan, I need you. Send. The message disappeared into digital void. She stared at the screen, rain dripping from her nose, her ruined hair, her trembling chin. 1 minute passed. 2. Nothing. Her battery dropped to 20%. Then, 3 dots appeared at the bottom of the screen. Disappeared. Reappeared. Her breath stopped. The response came through. Where are you? Roxy collapsed against the brick wall, sliding down until she sat in a puddle on Neon Street. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself cry. Not because she was broken, but because someone had finally asked where she was. And meant it. Comment karma if you think Quan deserves what's coming. Or tell me, would you have called your family or tried to survive alone? Roxy's fingers trembled as she typed her location. Neon Street and 9th. Back alley behind Jade Spire. The response was immediate. Don't move. 20 minutes. Then another message. Roxy, we never stopped watching. Her breath hitched. Watching? What did that mean? She pulled her knees up as much as her belly allowed, making herself smaller against the brick wall. Rain hammered the pavement around her. A group of men smoking near the corner kept glancing her way. Curious, predatory, calculating. One of them started walking toward her. Hey, you need help. His smile didn't match his eyes. Roxy's hand tightened around her phone. Someone's coming for me. Yeah. He crouched down to her level. Who? Your husband? Because guys who let their women sit in alleys like this don't usually come back. What would you do if a stranger approached you when you were at your most vulnerable? She didn't answer, just stared at her phone screen like it was a lifeline. Battery at 17%. The man reached out. A black SUV screeched around the corner, headlights slicing through rain and neon. It stopped inches from where Roxy sat. Doors opened before the engine even cut. 3 shadows emerged. The man who'd been approaching her took one look and backed away fast, hands up, disappearing into the darkness he'd come from. Because these weren't just men. These are predators recognizing something higher on the food chain. Titan reached her first. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, sharp-featured, with eyes that could calculate your net worth in 3 seconds. But softer now. His expression cracked when he saw her hair, her soaked dress, the way she was curled against the wall protecting their niece. Little sister. His voice broke on the second word. Roxy tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Titan caught her, pulling her against his chest. His coat smelled like expensive cologne and safety. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shoulder. "I should have listened. You warned me." "Stop." Titan pulled back, framing her face with both hands. "We don't do apologies. We do action." Behind him, Ghost, the middle brother, silent and lethal, scanned the alley with eyes that missed nothing. He wore all black, blending with shadows like he was born from them. His jaw was locked tight enough to shatter teeth. Viper, the youngest, paced near the SUV like a caged animal. His fist kept clenching and unclenching. "Say the word, Roxy. Just say it. I'll go up there right now and—" "Viper." Titan's voice carried command. "Not yet. Not yet." Viper's eyes blazed. "Look at her. He dumped our sister in the worst part of Seorim like she's—" "I said not yet." Titan's tone dropped to absolute zero. "Because we're not doing this fast. We're doing it right." Ghost finally spoke, his voice quiet as midnight. "He'll wish we'd made it fast." Roxy looked between her three brothers. Men she'd walked away from 3 years ago because Quan convinced her they were overprotective and suffocating. Men who'd tried calling, texting, even showing up at her wedding to warn her. Men she'd blocked because love made her stupid. "How did you get here so fast?" she asked. Titan and Ghost exchanged a look. "We need to get you warm first," Titan said, deflecting. "Then we'll talk." But Roxy caught something in his expression, something that felt like guilt. "Titan, how did you get here in 20 minutes? Silence. Then Ghost answered, "Because we were already in Seorim. We've been here for 11 months. The world tilted. "What? We never left," Ghost continued, his voice still that unsettling calm. "We've been monitoring the situation. Waiting. Waiting for what?" Viper stopped pacing. "For you to realize what he was." The words hit like ice water. "You knew? This whole time, you knew what he was doing to me. We knew he was isolating you," Titan said carefully. "We knew he was controlling your accounts, your contacts, your movements. But we couldn't intervene. Why not?" Her voice rose, echoing off brick walls. "Because you had to choose." Ghost stepped closer, rain dripping from his dark hair. "If we'd pulled you out before you were ready, you would have gone back to him. Believed his lies. Blamed us for interfering." Titan nodded. "We needed you to see him clearly. To reach out yourself. So you just watched." Roxy felt something crack inside her chest. "Watch while he—" "We hated every second of it." Viper's voice shook with barely controlled rage. "Every day you stayed with him was torture. But pulling someone from a burning building only works if they want to leave. If your family knew you were in danger but couldn't help until you asked, would you forgive them? Drop your honest answer below." Roxy's mind spun. 11 months. They've been watching for 11 months. Which meant, "You know everything, don't you?" Her voice went quiet. "About Suki. About tonight. About all of it." "Everything," Ghost confirmed. "Then you know—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words that made it real. Titan's expression went glacial. "We know he planned this. We know she's not just his mistress. She's working for someone else. And we know exactly how deep his empire goes." He paused, letting that sink in. Or rather, how deep he thinks it goes. Something in his tone made Roxy's skin prickle. "What does that mean?" The brothers exchanged another look. Some silent conversation happening at a frequency she couldn't hear. Finally, Titan spoke. "It means Boss Quan built his kingdom on a foundation he never bothered to investigate. And the people who laid that foundation, He smiled then. Cold. Dangerous. Nothing like the brother who used to sneak her candy as a child. They've been waiting a very long time to collect what he owes. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating all three brothers in stark relief. In that moment, Roxy saw something she'd forgotten. Her brothers weren't just protective. They were powerful in ways that made men like Quan look like children playing dress-up. Get in the car, Titan said gently. We're taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere he'll never find you. Where? Home. Roxy let them guide her into the SUV. The leather seats were warm. Someone had prepared blankets. There was even ginger tea in an insulated container for nausea. They'd planned this rescue down to the smallest detail, because they'd been ready for months. As the SUV pulled away from Neon Street, Roxy looked back at the Jade Spire, the tower where she'd lived as a prisoner pretending to be a princess. Lights still glowed in the penthouse. Quan probably hadn't even noticed she was gone yet. Probably didn't care. But he would. Subscribe before you miss what happens when a man realizes he didn't just lose his wife. He destroyed something he never truly owned. Ghost's phone buzzed. He read the message, then showed it to Titan. Titan's smile widened. It's starting. The helicopter descended on Neon Street like a mechanical angel of death. Wind from the rotors scattered trash, newspapers, and terrified pedestrians. Drug dealers scattered. Police cars that had been 2 blocks away suddenly developed engine trouble. Even a neon sign seemed to flicker and bow. This wasn't a medical evacuation. This was a declaration of war. Roxy pressed against the SUV window, watching the black military-grade chopper touch down in the middle of the intersection. Traffic had already stopped. Not because of signals, but because 3 men in tactical gear appeared on rooftops with rifles, ensuring compliance. Is that? Her voice died. Overkill. Viper grinned from the driver's seat. Probably. But Titan doesn't do subtle when his family's involved. Ghost leaned forward between the seats. The question isn't whether we overdid it. The question is, does Boss Quan understand what just happened? Roxy glanced up at the Jade Spire penthouse. Lights blazed in the windows. She imagined Quan looking down right now, seeing the helicopter, the armed guards, the precision of this extraction, realizing she wasn't some helpless woman he could discard. She was someone people mobilized armies for. Have you ever watched someone realize they made a catastrophic mistake? Comment if you've seen that moment of recognition. Titan emerged from the helicopter, phone pressed to his ear. Even from a distance, Roxy could read his body language, controlled fury barely leashed. He was giving orders in rapid-fire Korean, each command sharp as a blade. Who's he talking to? Roxy asked. Everyone who matters, Ghost replied cryptically. The SUV door opened. Titan slid in beside Roxy, still on the phone. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders while simultaneously instructing someone to freeze multiple accounts and secure building access. Multitasking catastrophe with brotherly affection. He ended the call and finally looked at her. Really looked. His eyes traced her butchered hair, her soaked dress, the way she kept one hand protectively over her belly. Did he touch you? No. Suki did though. Not what I asked. Titan's voice went dangerously soft. Did he touch you? Roxy remembered Quan holding her down while Suki cut, his hands on her shoulders, his weight keeping her immobile. Yes. Titan's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone again and sent a single text. Roxy couldn't see who received it, but she heard the immediate buzz of responses flooding in. What did you just do? Authorized phase 2. He pocketed the phone. We're not playing defense anymore. The helicopter's rotors were still spinning, throwing wind and noise across the entire block. People filmed from windows. Someone would post this on social media within minutes. By morning, every criminal in CRM would be asking the same question. Who was powerful enough to land a military helicopter in the middle of the city without consequences? And why did they come for Boss Kwan's wife? Inside the helicopter, Roxy discovered just how prepared her brothers had been. Medical equipment lined one wall. Dr. Cobalt, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands, waited with an ultrasound machine already warmed up. "Let's check on baby," she said gently, helping Roxy onto the examination table. Roxy's throat tightened. "I don't even know if she's okay. The stress. We'll know in 30 seconds. Ghost stood near the door, sentinel still. Viper paced the small space like a caged wolf. Titan sat beside Roxy, holding her hand with surprising gentleness for someone who'd just orchestrated a military-grade extraction. Dr. Cobalt spread cold gel across Roxy's belly. The ultrasound wand pressed down. Static filled the cabin. Then a heartbeat. Strong. Fast. Defiant. Roxy's eyes flooded. "She's okay. She's perfect." Dr. Cobalt smiled. "Strong girl. Takes after her mother." Viper stopped pacing. "She better take after her uncles. Kid's gonna need attitude where she's going. If you found out you were stronger than you thought, would it change how you saw yourself?" Drop yes or no below. The helicopter lifted off. Through the window, Roxy watched Seorim shrink beneath them. The Jade Spire growing smaller, less significant, just another building in a city full of structures that looked important but weren't. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Fortress Zero," Titan answered. "Our private estate. 3 hours north. Completely off-grid. No one knows it exists except the people we trust with our lives." "And baby Nola," Ghost added quietly. Roxy blinked. "You already named her?" "You mentioned the name once. 3 years ago. Said if you ever had a daughter, you'd call her Nola." Ghost's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. We remembered. The realization hit like a wave. They'd been paying attention even when she thought they'd given up on her. Every detail, every conversation, every small thing she'd mentioned in passing. They'd been waiting, not just for 11 months, for 3 years. Subscribe so you never miss how far family will go to protect their own. "I need to ask you something," Roxy said, looking between all 3 brothers. "And I need the truth." Titan nodded. "Always. When you said you've been watching, what exactly did you see?" The brothers exchanged glances. Some silent conversation happening again. Finally, Ghost answered. "We saw him replace your friends with people who reported to him. We saw him intercept job offers before you knew they existed. We tracked the separate bank account where he deposited your grandmother's inheritance, money you never knew you had." Roxy's stomach dropped. "What inheritance?" 23 million won, Titan said flatly. "Left to you when grandmother died 4 years ago. Quan forged your signature, claimed you'd agreed to joint management, then transferred it into accounts you couldn't access." The helicopter cabin suddenly felt too small. "He stole from me?" "He stole everything," Viper growled. "Your money, your identity, your choices. He was building a cage so perfect you'd never realize you were trapped." Dr. Cobalt finished the examination and quietly excused herself to the cockpit, giving them privacy. Roxy stared at her hands, at the empty ring finger where a diamond had sat for 3 years. She'd taken it off in the SUV, thrown it out the window somewhere near 7th Avenue. "What else did you find?" Titan pulled out a tablet and handed it to her. "Everything." The screen showed folders labeled with dates, locations, transactions. Roxy opened one at random. June 2024. Intercepted communications. Messages between Quan and someone named Baron Lee discussing how to handle the wife situation without raising suspicion. Another folder showed property transfers. Her childhood home in Busan, sold without her knowledge. Another revealed medical records she'd never signed consent for. He was planning this for over a year, Ghost said quietly. Tonight wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. Roxy's hands trembled. Why didn't you stop him sooner? Because stopping him wasn't enough. Titan's voice hardened. We needed documentation. Evidence. A legal case so airtight that when we moved, he'd have nowhere to run. The helicopter banked left, heading toward mountains visible on the horizon. Viper crouched beside her. You asked if we were watching. We were, but we were also building something. Building what? All three brothers smiled then. Identical expressions of cold satisfaction. His coffin, Titan said simply. Roxy woke to silence. Not the oppressive silence of the penthouse, where quiet meant Quan was calculating, planning, preparing to take something else from her. This was different, peaceful, the kind of quiet that came from safety, not danger. She opened her eyes to a room bathed in soft morning light. Medical equipment lined one wall, but the space felt more like a luxury hotel suite than a hospital. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked mountains wrapped in mist. The bed was impossibly comfortable, with sheets that smelled like lavender instead of antiseptic. And in 3 chairs arranged around her bed, like guardian statues, sat her brothers. All 3, still in yesterday's clothes, eyes red from sleeplessness. None of them had left. When was the last time someone stayed awake just to make sure you were safe? Titan noticed her stirring first. Easy. Don't sit up too fast. But Roxy was already pushing herself up, hand instinctively moving to her belly. Nola is perfect. Dr. Cobalt's voice came from the doorway. She entered carrying a tablet, professional but warm. I monitored her all night. Strong heartbeat, active movement. Your daughter is a fighter. Relief flooded through Roxy so intensely she felt dizzy. Dr. Cobalt sat on the edge of the bed, checking Roxy's vitals with practiced efficiency. How are you feeling? Any cramping? Dizziness? Nausea? Tired? Confused? Roxy touched her chopped hair, wincing at the uneven texture. Angry. Good. Dr. Cobalt made notes on her tablet. Anger means you're processing. Depression would concern me more. Ghost shifted in his chair. She'll have access to trauma therapy. Dr. Min specializes in abuse recovery. She's already been briefed. Roxy looked at him. You thought of everything. We had 11 months to prepare. Ghost replied simply. Viper stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His shoulders were rigid with tension that hadn't released since last night. I need permission. For what? Roxy asked, though part of her already knew. To end this. Viper turned, and the expression on his face was pure predatory focus. 1 phone call. 3 hours. He disappears. No one finds the body. Clean. Belmano. Titan's voice cut through the room. Viper. No. Viper's hands clenched into fists. You didn't see her on that street. You didn't see what they did to her hair, her dignity, his voice cracked. I can't just sit here and plan. I need to act. If someone hurt your family, would you want revenge or justice? There's a difference. Comment which one you'd choose. Roxy studied her youngest brother. Viper had always been the explosive one, quick to anger, slower to forgive. The one who'd threatened Quan at her wedding, who'd been physically restrained from making the groom disappear. She'd thought he was overreacting then. Now she understood he'd been the only one seeing clearly. Viper, she said softly. He looked at her, jaw tight. I don't want him dead. Silence crashed through the room. What? Viper stared like she'd spoken a foreign language. Roxy's voice strengthened. Death is too easy, too fast. He doesn't get to escape into nothing while I'm left carrying the weight of what he did. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignoring Dr. Cobalt's warning about taking it slow. Her feet touched cold marble floors. She stood, one hand on her belly, and walked to the window where Viper stood frozen. I want him destroyed, she continued, each word deliberate. I want him to lose everything the way he tried to make me lose everything. I want him to feel small, powerless, forgotten. I want him to spend years understanding exactly what he threw away. Her reflection stared back from the glass. Butchered hair, exhausted eyes, but something new burning underneath. Something that looked like rage, refined into purpose. I want him to know that the woman he discarded became everything he pretended to be. The room held its breath. Then Titan started laughing. Low at first, then building. There she is. There who is? Roxy turned. The steel we raised. Titan stood, crossing to her. You spent 3 years playing small because he needed you small. But that was never who you were. Ghost nodded slowly. You were always this person. You just forgot. Viper's expression shifted from confusion to something like pride. You want him to suffer. I want him to understand. Roxy met each brother's gaze. Can you do that? Can you make him lose everything without killing him? The brothers exchanged looks again. That silent language they developed over decades. Titan smiled. Little sister, we can do so much worse than death. Dr. Cobalt cleared her throat. Before you plan anyone's downfall, I need my patient to eat something. Nola requires nutrients, even if revenge requires strategy. She wheeled in a cart loaded with food, real food, not the controlled portions Quan had insisted on. Fresh fruit, warm bread, soup that smelled like home. Roxy realized she was starving. As she ate, Titan pulled up a chair. We need to show you something, but only if you're ready. Show me what? Ghost opened a laptop and turned it toward her. The screen displayed a complex web of connections. Names, companies, bank accounts, all linked by digital threads. This is Boss Quan's empire, Ghost explained. What he thinks he built. And this, Titan swiped to a second screen, is the reality. The second web showed the same empire, but with additional layers underneath. Foundation companies, silent investors, holdings that traced back to a single source. Steel conglomerate. Roxy's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What am I looking at? 15 years ago, we funded the Ryu Syndicate's expansion into Southeast Asia, Titan said calmly. Anonymous investment, laundered through 12 shell corporations. Baron Lee thought he was dealing with Hong Kong investors. Boss Quan inherited those connections when he took over from his predecessor. The implications crashed over Roxy like a wave. You're saying, we own him, Ghost finished. We always have. You just never knew it. Subscribe before you miss the moment a king realizes he was never on the throne. Roxy stared at the screen, at the intricate web connecting her family to the man who just destroyed her life. He married me thinking I was nobody. Worse, Viper said darkly. He married the little sister of the men who funded his entire existence. Then he threw her away like garbage. Does he know yet? Roxy asked. No. Titan's smile was ice. But he's about to learn. Dr. Cobalt refilled Roxy's water glass. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear any of this. Medical confidentiality and all. Smart woman, Ghost murmured. Roxy looked down at her belly, at the daughter growing inside her. Nola would be born into a family that didn't just survive, they conquered. She'd never know what it felt like to be small, powerless, discarded. "When do we start?" Roxy asked. Titan checked his watch. "Actually, we started 6 hours ago. Kwan's gonna wake up to some interesting news." "What kind of news?" All three brothers grinned. "The kind that makes you check your bank balance 3 times because you can't believe what you're seeing," Viper said. "Or rather," Ghost corrected, "what you're not seeing." The elevator descended for 90 seconds. Roxy counted. 90 seconds straight down, deep enough that her ears popped twice. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a space that shouldn't exist. The war room stretched the length of a football field, carved from living rock beneath Fortress Zero. Screens covered every wall, some showing stock tickers, others displaying security feed from locations across 3 continents. A massive tactical table dominated the center, its surface illuminated with holographic displays. This wasn't a room. It was a command center for people who move nations. "Welcome," Titan said, his voice echoing slightly, "to where we actually work. Have you ever discovered that someone you knew was living an entirely different life you never suspected?" Ghost moved to one of the workstations, fingers flying across keyboards. Screens came alive with data, financial records, surveillance footage, intercepted communications. Years of information organized with surgical precision. Viper leaned against the tactical table, arms crossed. "Everything we've collected on Boss Quan lives here. Every transaction, every threat, every lie. How long have you been gathering this?" Roxy asked, still processing the sheer scale of the operation. "Since your second date with him," Titan replied casually. "My second," she stopped. "That was 4 years ago. 4 years, 2 months, 16 days. Ghost didn't look up from his screens. "We started surveillance the moment we realized he was serious about pursuing you." Roxy moved closer to the tactical table. Files appeared across its surface, each one labeled with dates and locations. She touched one at random. It expanded into detailed notes about a charity event she'd attended with Quan in 2023. "You documented everything." "We documented everything that mattered," Titan corrected. He swiped through several files, pulling up a specific folder. "But what matters most is what we found in the last 6 months." The holographic display shifted. Financial statements filled the space above the table, numbers cascading like digital rain. 3 months ago, Ghost began, his voice that unsettling calm. "We noticed irregular transfers from Quan's primary accounts. Small amounts at first. 5,001 here, 10,000 there. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Someone was embezzling," Roxy guessed. "Someone smart," Titan confirmed. "Someone who understood how to move money without triggering alerts. Someone with intimate access to his financial systems." The display zoomed in on a specific account trail. All roads led to one name. Suki Min. Roxy's breath caught. She was stealing from him. "For 8 months, Ghost said. Total amount, 47 million won. Viper's grin was vicious. "The Mistress was robbing him blind while he was busy destroying you." Poetic. If someone betrayed the person who betrayed you, would you feel satisfaction or just see 2 predators eating each other? Drop your take. There's more. Titan pulled up another file, this one marked with red security warnings. "Suki's not working alone. She's been funneling information to the Quan Syndicate." The name made Roxy's stomach drop. Even she knew that name, Quan's biggest rival. The criminal organization that had been trying to absorb the Ryu Syndicate for 5 years. "They hired her," she said, pieces clicking into place. "They recruited her 18 months ago," Ghost confirmed. Paid her $3 million up front, with another $5 million promised upon completion. Her job: seduce boss Quan, destabilize his marriage, create chaos from the inside, and steal everything she could on the way out, Viper added. Roxy stared at the evidence sprawling across the holographic display. So Suki never cared about him. She was just using him the way he used you, Titan finished. Except she was better at it. The realization should have felt satisfying. Instead, it just felt hollow. Two predators circling each other, and Roxy had been caught in the middle, collateral damage in someone else's war. "Does Quan know?" she asked. "Not yet." Ghost's fingers moved across the keyboard. "But he's about to. We're leaking the evidence to him at 6 a.m. Right around the time he discovers his accounts are frozen." Roxy checked the time. 5:47 a.m. 13 minutes. "What happens when he finds out?" "Panic," Titan said simply. "He'll try to contact Suki. She won't answer. She's already on a flight to Singapore. He'll try to access backup funds. They're gone. He'll call Baron Lee and his other associates. They'll have received anonymous tips about investigations and will distance themselves immediately. Everything he built," Ghost continued, "collapses in approximately," he checked his watch, "6 hours. Give or take. Subscribe so you don't miss the moment power realizes it was always borrowed." Viper pushed off from the table. "That's the beautiful part. We're not touching him directly. We're just removing the supports, letting gravity do the work." Roxy walked the perimeter of the room, taking in the screens showing live feeds from CRM. One camera pointed at the Jade Spire. From this angle, she could see the penthouse windows glowing in pre-dawn darkness. Quan was up there right now, probably sleeping peacefully, believing he'd solved his wife problem, believing he was untouchable. In 13 minutes, his world would begin ending. "There's something else," Ghost said, his tone shifting. "Careful," like he was handling explosives. Titan and Viper went still. "What?" Roxy turned back to the table. Ghost pulled up a new file. This one was different, older, the digital equivalent of yellowed paper. He hesitated before opening it, which was unusual for someone who never hesitated. "When we were documenting Quan's business records, we found something unexpected." The file expanded. At the top of the document sat an image that made Roxy's heart stop. A family crest, silver and black. 3 interlocked shields surrounding a phoenix. The Steele family crest. Her family's crest. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Why would Quan have?" "It's not from Quan's files," Titan interrupted, his voice tight. "It's from his predecessors. The original boss who founded the Ryu Syndicate 20 years ago." Ghost zoomed in on the document. It was a contract, old school, actual paper scanned into digital format. The language was formal, legal binding. And at the bottom, 2 signatures. James Steele, her father. Ryu Dae-young, Quan's predecessor. Roxy's knees went weak. Viper caught her arm, steadying her. "Dad," her voice cracked. "Our father signed a contract with the syndicate that Quan eventually inherited," Titan finished. Which means the connection goes deeper than we thought," Ghost said quietly. "We didn't just fund the Ryu Syndicate as outside investors. Our family was there from the beginning." The room fell silent except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of ventilation systems. Roxy stared at her father's signature, elegant handwriting she remembered from birthday cards and bedtime notes. The same hand that signed contracts with criminal empires. "What was Dad doing?" she asked. "Why would he?" "We don't know yet," Titan admitted. "The contract is heavily redacted. Legal language designed to obscure actual terms. But the crest proves direct family involvement. Viper's jaw worked. So when Quan married Roxy, he didn't just marry into money. He married into the literal foundation of his empire. And he had no idea, Ghost added. The implications spiraled outward like cracks in glass. Every business deal, every territory negotiation, every moment Quan thought he was building his own legacy, he was actually operating inside a framework her family created. Comment karma if you think he deserved to marry into the family that owned him without knowing it. There's one more thing, Ghost said, pulling up a final image. A photo. Old. Grainy. Taken maybe 25 years ago. It showed 4 men standing in front of what looked like the original Ryu Syndicate headquarters. 3 of them Roxy didn't recognize. But the 4th, her breath stopped. Her father, young, smiling, standing with the men who would build a criminal empire. And in the background, barely visible, 3 small children. Titan, Ghost, Viper, you were there, Roxy whispered. We grew up in this world, Titan said softly. We just forgot how deep the roots went. The screens around them flickered. 5:59 morgens. 1 minute until Quan's account froze. 1 minute until the first domino fell. Ghost's computer chimed, an alert. He's awake. Just checked his phone. All 4 Steels turned to watch the security feed showing the Jade Spire penthouse. Through the window, they could see movement, a figure at a computer. Boss Quan, starting his day, checking his empire, about to discover it was already gone. Let's watch, Titan said quietly. And they did. 15 years ago, the meeting took place in a penthouse that no longer existed, demolished 3 years later to erase evidence. 5 men sat around a table made of reclaimed ship timber. Whiskey, cigars, the smell of old money and new ambition. The Ryu Syndicate needs capital, Baron Lee said, spreading financial projections across the table. 200 million won to expand into Southeast Asian markets. In exchange, you receive 30% ownership. Silent partnership. Your names never appear. Titan Steel, 28 years old then, already calculating empires in his sleep, studied the numbers. Beside him, Ghost analyzed risk factors while Viper assessed the men across from them with predatory focus. Why us? Titan asked. Because you're invisible. Baron Lee leaned forward. The Steel family operates in shadows. You move markets without fingerprints. That's what we need, funding that can't be traced back to its source. Titan looked at his brothers. Ghost nodded once. Viper shrugged. Your call. 40%, Titan said. And we maintain veto power over major decisions. That's non-négociable. Titan's voice could have frozen oceans. You need money that won't get you investigated. We need assurance our investment won't be weaponized against us. 40%, veto power, or we walk. 3 minutes of silence. Then Baron Lee extended his hand. Deal. What would you do if you discovered your boss was actually your employee? Drop your reaction. They shook on it. The Steel brothers became the invisible architects of the Ryu Syndicate. Silent owners. Shadow kings. The foundation upon which lesser men built thrones. And 15 years later, one of those lesser men married their baby sister without realizing he was proposing to royalty. Present day, 6 a.m. Boss Quan Ji-young woke feeling victorious. The Roxy problem, solved. Suki waiting in his bed, perfection. Empire intact, absolute. He stretched, feeling the satisfaction of a man who'd pruned dead weight from his life. His phone buzzed. Banking app notification. Unusual account activity detected. Probably nothing. Maybe a large purchase Suki made. He opened the app, half asleep, expecting to see normal transactions. Balance, 0 Korean wons. He blinked, refreshed the page. Balance, 0 Korean wons. His heart rate spiked. Wrong account. He switched to his primary business account. Account frozen. Contact bank immediately. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He tried his third account. His fourth. His offshore holdings in Singapore. All frozen. All empty. All gone. Have you ever watched your entire world collapse in 60 seconds? That's what's happening right now. Kwon threw off the sheets, stumbling to his home office. Computer. Multiple screens. He logged into his financial management system with shaking fingers. Every account displayed the same message. Access restricted. Legal hold. Investigation pending. No. No. His voice cracked. He grabbed his phone, dialing Baron Lee. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Tried Young Hwan, his accountant. Voicemail. Tried his lawyer. Disconnected number. Panic clawed up his throat like something alive. He opened his email. 17 new messages. All from business partners. All with similar subject lines. Need to discuss our arrangement. Concerns about recent developments. Terminating partnership effective immediately. His hands trembled so badly he could barely scroll. Then, an email with no subject line. Zenda, anonymous. He opened it. One sentence. You built your throne on borrowed ground. The owners would like it back. Attached, a single document. The original investment contract from 15 years ago. The one Baron Lee said was lost in a fire. The one that proved the Ryu syndicate wasn't built by Ryu at all. Kwon's eyes scanned the document, searching for the investors' names. They weren't there. Redacted. Every name blacked out, except for one line near the bottom. One clause that had somehow escaped redaction. In the event of breach of contract terms, including but not limited to abuse of family members, theft of assets, or actions deemed detrimental to investor interests, all holdings revert to original shareholders immediately and without recourse. Family members? What family members? He kept reading, pulse hammering. The party of the first part, investor, maintains controlling interest in perpetuity. Boss Ryu De-young and all successors operate under license granted by and revocable at the sole discretion of controlling shareholders. Successors. He was a successor, which meant his computer dinged. New email. Same anonymous sender. This one contained a single image. A family crest. Silver phoenix surrounded by 3 shields. And beneath it, typed in letters that felt like bullets. Your wife's maiden name was Steele. Did you ever wonder why that name sounded familiar? The room tilted. Subscribe before you miss what happens when a king realizes he was always a pawn. Kwon's mind raced backward through 3 years of marriage. Roxy never talked about her family. He'd assumed they were dead. Irrelevant. She'd been so small, so manageable. He'd never thought to dig deeper. Never thought to ask why someone with her education, her grace, her bearing would accept his proposal so easily. Never thought she might be stepping down to marry him instead of up. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. Her brothers say hello. Brothers? Another text. Titan. Ghost. Viper. You might want to Google those names. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Titan Steel. Results. CEO of Steel Conglomerate. Net worth. Classified. Known for hostile takeovers and market manipulation. Ghost Steel. Results. Minimal information. References to invisible billionaire and owns more than anyone knows. Viper Steel. Results: former special forces. Current occupation: unknown. Rumors of private security firm that solves problems permanently. Quan's blood turned to ice. The Steel Brothers. The three names whispered in back rooms and private clubs. The shadows that moved entire industries without ever being seen. And he'd marry their sister, then thrown her away like garbage. His computer chimed again. This time, a video file. He clicked it with numb fingers. Security footage. Time stamped 11:47 p.m. last night. Neon Street and 9th. It showed Roxy, pregnant, soaked, hair destroyed, sitting against a brick wall. Then, a black helicopter descending. Armed guards. 3 men emerging. The camera angle was perfect, deliberate. Someone wanted him to see this. Wanted him to see the moment Roxy was extracted by people with military-grade resources. Wanted him to see the Steel Brothers standing over their sister like avenging angels. The video ended with a final message burned into the screen. She was never yours. She was always ours. You just borrowed her. And now we're taking back everything you stole. Quan's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered with shaking hands. Hello. A voice. Male. Cold as winter. Refined. Educated. The voice of someone who'd never raised it because he'd never needed to. Boss Quan, or should I say, Quan Jiong, former manager of our family investment. Who is this? You married my sister 3 years ago. You abused her for most of that time. Last night, you threw her into the street like refuse. Titan Steel. Quan's legs gave out. He collapsed into his office chair. I can explain. There's nothing to explain. Titan's voice never rose. Never shook. We own 40% of the Ryu Syndicate. We always have. Every territory you claimed, every deal you made, every dollar you earned, it happened because we allowed it. That's impossible. I built. You built nothing. Now, there was emotion. Contempt. You inherited a structure we created. You were an employee playing dress-up as a king. And the moment you touched our sister, you violated the only rule that mattered. What would you give to undo the worst mistake you ever made? He'd give everything. But it's too late. Please, Quan whispered. I'll make this right. You'll do nothing. You have nothing. Your accounts are frozen. Your partners have abandoned you. Your assets are being seized. And Suki, the woman you replaced Roxy with, is currently on a flight to Singapore with 47 million won she stole from you. The line went silent for 3 seconds. Then Titan's voice returned, softer now, more dangerous. You wanted a queen who understood power. You had one. You just never realized she was born into more power than you could ever steal. Click. The call ended. Quan sat in his office as dawn light crept through windows, illuminating an empire that no longer existed. Everything he built gone. Everyone he'd controlled vanished. The throne he believed was his, always borrowed. And the woman he'd discarded, royalty he'd never deserved. His computer screen flickered one final time. New message. Welcome to the rest of your life. Quan's fingers hammered the keyboard like a man trying to punch through concrete. Login failed. Account suspended. Access denied. Each error message felt like a physical blow. He'd been at this for 3 hours, calling banks, screaming at automated systems, threatening lawyers who no longer answered his calls. Nothing worked. Every door he'd walked through yesterday was bolted shut today. His phone buzzed. Finally, Baron Lee returning his 17 missed calls. Baron, thank God. Listen, something's happened with my accounts and I can't help you. Baron's voice was flat. Dead. The tone of someone cutting a gangrenous limb. What? We've been partners for We were never partners, Quan. I was your connection, and that connection just became a liability I can't afford. Have you ever felt someone erase you from their life in real time? Comment if you know that feeling. Bear and wait. I received files this morning. Financial documents. Photos. Recordings of conversations I don't remember having, but apparently did. Someone's building a case, and I'm not going down with you. Who? Who sent them? I don't know. The email was anonymous. But whoever they are, they're thorough. They have everything, Quan. Everything. Baron's breathing turned ragged. I have a family. Kids. I'm not risking them for her. The line went dead. Quan stared at his phone like it had just bitten him. He pulled up his contacts, scrolled through names that used to mean power. Young-hwan, Detective Park, Councilmember Kim, every person who'd bowed to him last week. He called Young-hwan first. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Detective Park, straight to voicemail. Full inbox. Councilmember Kim, one ring. Then, don't call this number again. Click. Quan's hands shook so violently he dropped the phone. It clattered against the marble floor of his office. The same office where he'd planned Roxy's humiliation just 48 hours ago. The same office that suddenly felt like a cage. He stumbled to his bar cart, grabbed the first bottle he found. Whiskey. Expensive. Imported. He didn't bother with a glass. Just drank straight from the bottle, throat burning, trying to drown the panic crawling up his spine. His computer chimed. Email notification. Zenda anonymous. Subject, you should see this. His finger hovered over the delete button. Every instinct screamed not to open it. But curiosity, that poison that killed every cat, made him click. The email contained a single link to a private financial forum. The kind of place where real money talked and everyone else listened. He clicked it. The forum post had been up for 6 minutes. Already had 43 comments. Title, The Ryu Syndicate's Dirty Secret. Full financial breakdown. Below, spreadsheets, bank transfers, shell company registrations. Every illegal transaction from the past 5 years laid out with forensic precision. And at the bottom, a question that made Quan's blood freeze. If Boss Quan only controls 30% of his own syndicate, who owns the other 70%? Subscribe before the answer destroys everything you thought you knew about power. The comments section exploded. User_3847. Holy hell. These numbers don't lie. He's been operating on borrowed authority this whole time. Investor watch. Someone big is making a move. This isn't a leak. This is a declaration of war. Finance ghost. I heard whispers about silent partners in the Ryu organization. This confirms it. Quan's just middle management playing dress up. Quan's vision blurred. He refreshed the page. 62 comments now, growing exponentially. His empire's dirty secrets spreading through the financial underworld like a virus. His phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. Check your club. The Crimson Lounge. His private establishment. The place where deals were sealed and reputations were built. He pulled up the security app on his phone. Live feed from the front entrance. A chain stretched across the doors. A sign. Closed pending ownership transfer. No. His voice cracked. No, that's mine. I own. Another text. Wrong. The building lease was held by a shell company that just dissolved. You never owned anything. You managed it. There's a difference. His legs gave out. He slid down the wall, whiskey bottle still clutched in one hand, phone in the other. Everything was crumbling. Not slowly. Not over months. In hours. Someone was dismantling his life with surgical precision, and he couldn't even see who was holding the scalpel. His mind raced through possibilities. Rival syndicates, government agencies, foreign investors seeking revenge. But the attack felt personal, targeted, like someone knew exactly where every support beam was located and which ones to remove first. His office door opened. Suki walked in, dressed for travel. Designer luggage. Sunglasses despite the early hour. Relief flooded through him. Suki, thank God. We need to talk. Something's happening and I know. She set her bags down. Smiled. Not the seductive smile he was used to. Something colder. Businesslike. You know? Did someone contact you too? In a manner of speaking. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through messages. I've been in contact with several people actually. Very productive conversations. Something in her tone made his stomach drop. What are you talking about? Suki tilted her head, studying him like a specimen under glass. You really thought I loved you? That I wanted to build a life with you? The world slowed down. What? Quan, sweetheart. She laughed, bright, cruel, genuine. I was hired. 18 months ago. 3 million up front, 5 million upon completion. My job was simple. Seduce you, destabilize your marriage, steal everything I could, and disappear. If someone you trusted turned out to be playing you from day one, would you see it coming? Most people don't. The whiskey bottle slipped from his fingers, shattered against marble. You're lying. Am I? She pulled up her phone, showed him a text thread. Messages to someone named Director Quan. Updates on his movements. Photos of documents. Transfer confirmations. Evidence of 18 months of systematic betrayal. The Mistress thing was fun, Suki continued, checking her watch. But ultimately, I'm a professional. And you, Quan, were a very profitable contract. You stole from me. 47 million, to be precise. You never even noticed. She picked up her luggage. Here's the thing about men like you. You're so convinced of your own brilliance that you never see the knife until it's already between your ribs. She walked toward the door, paused. Oh, and Roxy? Your weak, pathetic wife? Turns out she's a Steele. You know, the Steele family. The ones who actually own this city. Quan's world tilted violently. You married into the family that funds your entire existence, then threw their daughter away like trash. That's not just stupid, Quan. That's legendary stupidity. She adjusted her sunglasses. Enjoy bankruptcy. I hear it builds character. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Quan sat in broken glass and spilled whiskey, surrounded by the wreckage of an empire that never belonged to him. His phone buzzed one last time. Another anonymous message. She's gone. Your money's gone. Your partners are gone. And we're just getting started. Suki Min made 3 critical mistakes in her life. The first, underestimating how quickly information traveled in the criminal underworld. The second, believing she could disappear without consequences. The third, not researching Roxana Steele thoroughly enough. That last one was about to become fatal. 6 hours earlier, before confronting Quan, Suki sat in her apartment reviewing her exit strategy. Passport? Check. Offshore accounts? Check. Flight to Singapore booked under an alias? Check. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. 18 months of work, 47 million richer, and Boss Quan left holding the pieces of a shattered empire. Clean. Professional. Exactly how Director Quan of the rival syndicate had hired her to operate. Her phone buzzed. Message from Director Quan. Excellent work. Final payment transferred. Extraction team ready at the airport. Suki smiled. Everything was proceeding perfectly. Then her laptop chimed. Email notification from her private investigator, the one she'd hired months ago to dig into Roxy's background. Subject: urgent. Findings you need to see immediately. She almost deleted it. The job was done. Roxy was irrelevant now. Just collateral damage in a larger operation. But curiosity made her click. Have you ever opened something you wish you could unsee? Comment if you've had that moment. The email contained a single document. Updated research. New findings that hadn't been in the original report. Subject, Roxana Steele. Family connections, updated. Brother 1, Titan Steele, CEO, Steel Conglomerate. Net worth exceeding $4.2 billion. Controls 67% of Southeast Asian shipping infrastructure. Brother 2, Ghost Steel. Identity largely classified. Known holdings include major stakes in banking, technology, pharmaceuticals. Estimated influence, immeasurable. Brother 3, Viper Steel, former special operations, current head of private security firm Phantom Corps, rumored to have eliminated 47 high-value targets across 12 countries. Critical note, Steele family holds controlling interest in multiple criminal organizations, including. Suki's eyes froze on the next line. The Ryu Syndicate, 40% ownership via shell companies established 2010. The coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattered against her marble floor. No. She scrolled frantically through the rest of the report. Financial flowcharts, corporate structures, shell company registrations, all roads leading back to one conclusion. The Steele brothers didn't just have money. They owned the empire Quan thought he'd built, which meant Suki's stomach dropped through the floor. She hadn't just helped destroy a mafia boss. She'd helped destroy the husband of the sisters belonging to the men who actually own the territory. Subscribe before you miss what happens when you realize you've been playing checkers while everyone else played chess. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She stared at it, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed not to answer. She answered. Ms. Min. The voice was male, educated, cold enough to freeze blood. My name is Titan Steele. I believe you know my sister. Suki's throat closed. I can explain. There's nothing to explain. You were hired to destabilize Boss Quan. You succeeded. Congratulations. The comm delivery made it worse somehow, like discussing weather patterns instead of dismantled lives. I didn't know, Suki whispered. About Roxy. About your family. I swear I didn't. I know. Still that terrible comm. Your private investigator's original report was incomplete. We made sure of that. The implications crashed over her. We'll let you do exactly what you were hired to do. Destroy Quan from the inside. Turn him against our sister. Create chaos. A pause. You were remarkably effective. Then why are you calling? Because effective tools still need to be put away when the job is finished. Suki's blood turned to ice. I have money. Connections. I can disappear. You'll never. Ms. Min, I want you to open your laptop. Check your offshore accounts. With trembling fingers, she did. Balance. $0. Every account. Every carefully hidden nest egg. Every penny she'd stolen gone. Where? Redistributed. Some to my sister. Some to the women your actions hurt. The rest donated to organizations that help abuse survivors. Titan's voice never changed tone. You played your part beautifully, but the stage is closing now. What do you want? Nothing. I'm simply informing you of the new rules. You have 72 hours to leave the country. If you attempt to contact Quan, if you speak to media, if you so much as breathe his name in public, the temperature in his voice dropped another 10 degrees. My brother Viper will be very disappointed. He's been hoping you'd give him an excuse. Suki had heard stories about Viper Steel. Whispers in back rooms. Bodies that vanished. Problems that stopped being problems. "I'll leave," she said quickly. "I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again." "Correct." Titan paused. "One more thing. The Quan Syndicate. Your employers? We acquired them this morning. Complete hostile takeover. Director Quan now works for us, which means the 5 million one he promised you." Suki's chest tightened. "Consider a payment for teaching you an important lesson. Always research who you're really working for." Had you dug deeper into Roxana Steele, you would have discovered the most dangerous family in Asia. Instead, you saw a scared pregnant woman and assumed she was powerless. The line went quiet for 3 seconds. People who underestimate my sister tend to have very short careers. Safe travels, Ms. Min. Click. Suki sat in her ruined apartment, surrounded by packed luggage and shattered dreams. Every carefully laid plan destroyed. Every stolen dollar reclaimed. Every advantage she thought she had, always an illusion. She believed she was the predator. Turns out she'd been the mouse all along, running through a maze controlled by people so far above her she'd never even seen the walls. If you played the game perfectly but discovered the rules were different than you thought, would you feel cheated or just outsmarted? Drop your answer. Her phone buzzed. New email from the private investigator. Subject: "You need TO, leave now." She opened it with numb fingers. "I'm being followed. Don't know by who, but they're good. Deleting all files related to Steele research. Recommend you do the same and disappear. Whatever you did, you pissed off the wrong family. Good luck. Don't contact me again." Suki closed her laptop, grabbed her passport, called a car service using a burner phone. 20 minutes later, she stood at Incheon International Airport, checking departure boards with paranoid frequency. Singapore, Seoul, Tokyo, didn't matter where, just away. She noticed a man in a dark suit watching her from across the terminal. Then another, and another. Not police. Something worse. Fantôme Corps, Viper's people, making sure she left, making sure she understood the terms. Suki boarded her flight to Singapore with one carry-on bag and the clothes on her back. Everything else, money, connections, identity, left behind like shed skin. As the plane lifted off, she looked out the window at Seorim disappearing beneath clouds. She'd entered that city thinking she was a player. She left understanding she'd always been a pawn. And the real players? They'd been moving pieces she couldn't even see. Dr. Min's office didn't look like a place where trauma got dissected. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, windows overlooking a garden where nothing grew but peaceful things, lavender, white roses, silent flowing water. Roxy sat in a chair that felt like being held, hands wrapped around herbal tea she wasn't drinking. 3 weeks had passed since Neon Street. 3 weeks since her brothers extracted her from a life she'd mistaken for love. Dr. Min, middle-aged, kind-eyed, with the patience of someone who'd heard every variation of human pain, waited. "I keep thinking about the scissors," Roxy said finally. "Tell me about that. Not the cutting. I mean, yes, the cutting. But more. I keep thinking about how I didn't fight back. Just stood there. Let happen. Have you ever blamed yourself for not fighting when fighting felt impossible? You're not alone." Dr. Min leaned forward slightly. "What do you think you should have done?" Screamed. Hit her. Run. Anything except just accept it. And if you had fought back, what would have happened? Roxy's hands tightened around the teacup. Quan was blocking the door. Suki had scissors. I was 7 months pregnant. Her voice cracked. Fighting would have been stupid. So you made a tactical choice to protect yourself and your daughter. It didn't feel tactical. It felt like giving up. Or Dr. Min said gently, it felt like surviving. Those are different things. One is weakness. The other is strength disguised as submission. The words hit like cool water on a burn. Roxy had spent 3 weeks believing she'd failed that night. Failed to be strong enough, loud enough, brave enough. But reframed through Dr. Min's lens, her silence became strategy. Her stillness became survival. "I have a question," Roxy said. "When does it stop hurting?" "It doesn't." Dr. Min's honesty was both brutal and kind. "It transforms. Right now, the pain is raw, unprocessed. Eventually, it becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you." "How long?" "Different for everyone, but you're already ahead of most people." "Ow, you left." Dr. Min set down her own teacup. "Most people in your situation go back. Believe the apologies. Accept the promises. You recognized the pattern and broke it. That takes clarity most people never achieve." Roxy looked out the window at the garden, watched a butterfly land on lavender. Stay for 3 seconds. Move on. "My brothers say I was manipulated. That Quan isolated me systematically. What do you think?" "I think." Roxy's throat tightened. "I think I saw the red flags and called them pink. Told myself controlling was protective. Possessive was passionate. That jealousy meant love. Why do you think you did that?" The answer came easier than expected. "Because I wanted to be chosen. My brothers are brilliant, powerful, overwhelming. I spent my whole life being Titan's sister or the Steel Girl. Quan made me feel like I was enough on my own." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out I was only enough when I was small." Subscribe before you miss what happens when someone decides being small is no longer acceptable. "Let me ask you something," Dr. Min said. "If you could go back, knowing everything you know now, would you still marry him?" Roxy started to say no. Obviously no. But then, yes. Dr. Min's eyebrows raised. "Interesting. Why?" "Because Nola wouldn't exist without him." Roxy's hand moved to her belly, where her daughter kicked steadily now, strong and persistent. "She's the only good thing that came from 3 years of bad decisions. And if I had to go through all of that to get her, I'd do it again." That's a complicated kind of gratitude. That's motherhood, I think. Complicated gratitude for complicated circumstances. They sat in silence for 3 minutes. Outside, the butterfly moved on. After therapy, Roxy returned to Fortress Zero to find Ghost waiting in her suite. He stood by the window, backlit by afternoon sun, holding a leather portfolio that looked expensive and official. "You shouldn't sneak up on pregnant women," Roxy said, but smiled to take the edge off. "Noted." Ghost turned, his expression unreadable as always. "I have something for you." He handed her the portfolio. She opened it, expecting legal documents, financial statements, the kind of boring paperwork that came with her brother's world. Instead, photographs. Her grandmother's house in Busan, the garden where Roxy played as a child, the porch where her mother taught her to read. "We bought it back," Ghost said quietly. "Quan sold it without your permission 2 years ago. Forged your signature. We tracked down the buyers, made them an offer they considered carefully, and returned full ownership to you." Roxy's eyes burned. The house, the land, everything. Ghost pulled more documents from the portfolio. "Your mother's jewelry collection that Quan claimed was lost in a robbery. Your grandmother's antique furniture he sold at auction. Your trust fund he diverted into accounts you couldn't access." He spread them across the coffee table. Deeds, certificates, bank statements. Total recovered assets, 93 million won. Plus properties, plus items of sentimental value. If someone gave back everything that was stolen from you, would it feel like justice or just like returning to zero? Roxy couldn't speak, just stared at evidence of her life being systematically restored. Ghost sat beside her. You're not starting over, Roxy. You're starting from where you should have been all along. I don't know what to do with this. Then don't decide today. The accounts are yours. The properties are secure. Take your time. He stood, preparing to leave. But when you're ready, maybe think about using it for something that matters. Like what? Ghost's rare smile appeared. Like making sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. The idea took root immediately. That night, Roxy sat in her room with a blank journal and a pen. She'd been avoiding this. Writing meant confronting. Confronting meant feeling. And feeling hurt like breaking bones that hadn't healed yet. But Dr. Min had encouraged it. Write what you wish you'd known, she'd said. Write the advice you'd give your younger self. Roxy opened to the first page and wrote, "Red flags I called pink. He isolated me from friends slowly, so I didn't notice until they were gone. He controlled my money while calling it taking care of me. He needed to know where I was for my safety. He replaced my job with being his beautiful wife. He criticized who I was while claiming he was helping me improve. The list grew to 20 items, then 30, patterns she'd mistaken for love. Baby Nola kicked hard against her ribs. Strong, insistent. Roxy pressed her hand to the spot. I know, sweet girl. I feel it too. Anger feels a lot like strength, doesn't it?" She kept writing. "Well, I would tell women who feel stuck. You're not crazy for sensing something is wrong. Trust that feeling. Love shouldn't make you smaller. If leaving feels dangerous, staying is probably worse. You deserve protection, not control. Your family, blood, or chosen will surprise you with their strength if you let them." She stared at the words, wondered who might need to hear them. Then she knew. Roxy grabbed her laptop, pulled up a blank document, and started typing. Project Phoenix, Foundation Proposal. Mission, to provide financial assistance, legal support, and safe housing to women escaping emotionally or financially abusive relationships. Why it matters? Because nobody should have to choose between safety and survival. She wrote for 3 hours, outlined programs, drafted budgets, designed support structures, used the $93 million one her brothers recovered as seed money. By midnight, she had a complete business plan. By 2 a.m., she had a name, the Phoenix Foundation, rising from ashes. By dawn, she had a purpose bigger than her pain. Nola kicked one more time, as if approving. Roxy whispered to her belly, "Your mother isn't going to be a victim, sweet girl. She's going to be the reason other people stop being victims." And for the first time in 3 weeks, she felt like herself again. Lexi Rivers had been an investigative journalist for 12 years. She'd exposed corruption in government, documented crimes, revealed corporate conspiracies that ruined CEOs. But the email that arrived at 3:47 a.m. was different. Sender, concerned citizen. Subject, the king who destroyed his queen. Attached, 847 files. When something seems too good to be true, most people ignore it. But journalists? We open it anyway. Lexi opened the first file. Audio recording. Time-stamped 3 months ago. 2 voices. One male, authoritative. One female, calculating. She pressed play. Male voice. The pregnancy is making her emotional. I need her gone before the baby comes. Female voice. What about the optics? People will ask questions. Male voice. Let them ask. By the time they figure out what happened, she'll be too broken to fight back. Lexi's fingers froze on the keyboard. She opened the second file. Text messages between the same 2 people, Boss Kwan and Suki Min, discussing strategies to isolate the wife from support systems. Third file. financial records showing systematic theft of funds from accounts belonging to Roxana Kwane Steele. Fourth file, medical records accessed without consent. Fifth file, forged signatures on property sales. By the 20th file, Lexi understood she wasn't looking at a story. She was looking at a documented case of calculated abuse spanning 3 years. And someone had handed her the nuclear option. She called her editor at 4:15 a.m. "This better be career-ending good." Marcus answered, voice thick with sleep. "It is, but not for me." Lexi pulled up the audio files. "I need legal to vet this. I need fact-checkers on standby. And I need front-page approval." "Lexi, it's 4 a.m. A Mafia boss systematically abused his pregnant wife while planning to discard her for his mistress. I have recordings, financial proof, timeline documentation. This isn't speculation. This is airtight." Silence on the other end. "Then, send me everything. I'll have the team in the office by 7 a.m. By 8 a.m., the legal team had verified authenticity. By 9 a.m., fact-checkers confirmed every detail against public records. By 10 a.m., Lexi had written the article of her career. Headline: "The king of the underworld built his throne on a broken wife." Subheading: "How boss Kwon Ji-young systematically destroyed Roxana Steele while the city celebrated his success." The article opened with a description of Neon Street, the place where Roxy was discarded. Then it walked readers through 3 years of manipulation, isolation, financial abuse, and calculated cruelty. But what made it devastating was the evidence. Audio clips embedded in the article. Readers could hear Kwon's voice planning his wife's destruction. Screenshots of text between him and Suki, mocking Roxy's pregnancy. Bank statements showing stolen inheritance. Forged signatures on property transfers. Every claim backed by documentation so thorough that lawsuits became impossible. Subscribe before the article drops and changes everything. At 11:47 a.m., the article went live. Within 10 minutes, 10,000 views. Within an hour, 500,000 views. By 2 p.m., trending on every social media platform in South Korea. By 4 p.m., international news outlets were picking it up. The internet exploded. Social media reactions. At Justice Now. I've followed Boss Kwon for years, thinking he was a respectable businessman. I feel sick. Hashtag believe women. At Serum Local. He threw his pregnant wife onto Neon Street. At night. In the rain. What kind of monster? At Finance Watch. More concerned about how he forged financial documents. If he did this to his wife, what did he do to business partners? At Mother of 3. Reading this while holding my daughter. If any man ever treats her like this, he's done. Hashtag Roxy deserves better. But not everyone was sympathetic. At Tradition First, maybe she deserved it. We don't know the full story. At Men's Rights 88. Another woman playing victim to destroy a successful man. Classic. At Skeptical Sam, convenient timing. Right when his empire collapses, suddenly there's proof of abuse? Suspicious. The comment sections became battlegrounds. If you saw someone defending the abuser, would you speak up or scroll past? Be honest in the comments. But the defenders were outnumbered. For every person questioning Roxy's story, 50 more showed up with receipts. Screenshots of Kwon's past behavior at public events. The too tight grip on Roxy's waist. The way she flinched when he reached for her. The forced smiles captured by photographers who'd thought nothing of it at the time. Former employees came forward with stories of how Kwon treated service workers, assistants, anyone he considered beneath him. Women who dated him before Roxy shared their own experiences. The controlling behavior, the financial manipulation, the way he made you feel special until you were trapped. A pattern emerged. Roxy wasn't an isolated incident. She was just the most documented one. By 6 p.m., law enforcement had no choice but to respond. Press conference, Seoul Metropolitan Police. Detective Choi stood at a podium, cameras flashing. In light of recent reporting by Ms. Lexi Rivers, the Financial Crimes Division has opened an investigation into boss Kwon Ji-young and associates. We are examining allegations of fraud, forgery, theft, and other potential violations. Reporter voices erupted. Will there be arrests? When will charges be filed? Is Roxana Kwon cooperating with investigators? Detective Choi held up a hand. The investigation is ongoing. We cannot comment on specific details. However, I will say this. He looked directly into the camera. Anyone with information regarding these allegations should contact our tip line. Your identity will be protected. The press conference ended, but the damage was permanent. In his penthouse, Kwon watched the news coverage with the kind of detachment that comes from complete psychological collapse. His face plastered on every screen. His voice played on loop. The recording where he discussed discarding Roxy like broken furniture. Comments scrolling past faster than he could read them. Monster. Abuser. Coward. How do we not see this? He deserves prison. He deserves worse. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He'd stopped answering 3 days ago, but muscle memory made him look. Text message. The article was just the beginning. Tomorrow, the criminal case drops. You should probably hire a lawyer. Oh wait, they all quit. Enjoy the spotlight, Kwon. You always wanted to be famous. He threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall, cracked, fell silent, just like his empire, just like his reputation, just like every relationship he'd burned on his way to the top of a mountain that never belonged to him. Outside, helicopters circled, news media hoping for a statement, a photo, any response to the scandal consuming the city. Boss Kwon sat in his penthouse, surrounded by luxury that now felt like a museum dedicated to his own destruction. And for the first time in his life, he understood what powerlessness felt like. The club was supposed to be his sanctuary. Kwon stood outside the Ember Room, his exclusive establishment where politicians whispered deals and criminals pretended to be businessmen. He'd owned this place for 5 years, built it from nothing, made it legendary. The door was locked. He tried his key card. Red light. Access denied. What the? He banged on the reinforced door. Open up. I own this place. A security guard appeared on the other side of the glass. Not one of Kwon's people. Someone new. Bigger. Colder. The guard pressed an intercom button. Property has been transferred to new management. You're no longer authorized. Transferred? By who? I'm not at liberty to say. Please leave the premises or I'll call authorities. Have you ever been locked out of something you built? Comment if you know that specific kind of betrayal. Kwon's hands trembled against the glass. I have contracts. Legal agreements. This is theft. Take it up with your lawyers, sir. I don't have the words died. Because he didn't. His legal team had dissolved 3 days ago via a group text that simply read, "We can no longer represent you. Good luck." The guard turned his back. Conversation over. Kwon stood on the street outside his own club, watching shadows move inside. People drinking his liquor, sitting in his chairs, living in the space he'd created. Without him, his phone buzzed. He got a new one after throwing the last against a wall. This one had exactly 7 contacts left. Everyone else had blocked him or changed numbers. He opened the message. Young Hwan, don't contact me again. They're watching everyone you knew. I have a family to protect. 6 contacts remaining. Another text arrived. Different number. Detective Park. Whatever you're planning to ask, the answer is no. I've been reassigned. Don't know who pulled those strings, but they're way above my pay grade. Goodbye. 5 contacts. Quan walked. Didn't know where. Just moved because standing still made him feel like prey. CRM looked different now. The same streets he'd walked like a king now felt hostile. People recognized him, not with respect, but with disgust. Whispers followed. Phones lifted. Someone was always recording. He ducked into an alley, leaning against brick walls slick with rain. Another message. Baron Lee. Saw the article. You're toxic. Deleting this number. Don't try to find me. 4 contacts. The messages kept coming, one by one, like dominoes falling in sequence. Council member Kim. Association with you is political suicide. Lose this number. 3. Investor CHOI. Pulling out of all joint ventures. My lawyers will be in touch about asset division. 2. Dr. Song. Can no longer provide medical services. Recommend finding new physician. 1. The last contact was his mother. Hadn't spoken to her in 6 years. She called him a disappointment at his wedding, and he'd cut her off completely. He stared at her name, wondered if blood meant anything when everything else had abandoned you. His finger hovered over call. Before he could decide, his phone buzzed one more time. Mom saw the news. You're not my son anymore. Don't come to the house. Don't call. You're dead to me. Zero contact. Subscribe before you miss what happens when someone realizes they've burned every bridge and there's nowhere left to run. Quan slid down the alley wall, phone falling from numb fingers. The screen cracked against pavement, but he didn't care. Everyone was gone. Not slowly, not over months. In 4 days, every person who'd smiled at him, worked with him, pretended to respect him, vanished like smoke. He'd built an empire on fear and transactions. Turns out both evaporate the moment you have nothing left to offer. He tried going home. The Jade Spire penthouse, his fortress, 50 floors above consequences. Marble and imported furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that made him feel like a god looking down on mortals. The elevator wouldn't go past the 47th floor. Access denied. He took the stairs, arrived at his floor breathless, legs burning, approached his door. A notice taped to the handle. Eviction notice, property seizure, by order of Financial Crimes Division. All assets frozen, pending investigation. He tried his key anyway. Changed locks. Quan stood in the hallway outside the penthouse he'd lived in for 8 years, locked out of his own life. A neighbor opened their door, Mrs. Chun, the wealthy widow who'd always complimented his suits. She looked at him, looked through him, then closed her door without a word. He was a ghost, present but not acknowledged, existing in a space that no longer recognized his right to be there. His stomach growled. Hadn't eaten in 16 hours. He pulled out his wallet, 3 credit cards, all frozen. Cash, 43,001. Enough for maybe 2 meals if he was careful. If you lost everything overnight, where would you go? Who would you call? Think about that. He walked to a convenience store 3 blocks away. The kind of place he'd never entered before, beneath his status. Now it was the only place that would accept his cash. He bought instant ramen, bottled water, a cheap phone charger. The clerk recognized him. Eyes widened, grabbed her phone, started recording. You're that guy, she whispered. The one who... Quan threw money on the counter and ran. Behind him, her voice carried. That's him. Boss Quan. He was just here. Within minutes, the video would be online. Within an hour, Everyone would know he'd been reduced to buying instant meals at convenience stores. The humiliation was becoming its own form of torture. He ended up at a bathhouse, the kind that rented sleeping quarters by the hour. Cheap, filled with people society forgot about. People like him now. Quan paid cash for a locker and a mat. Showered in communal facilities where other men avoided eye contact. Found his assigned sleeping space, a capsule barely big enough to lie down in. He crawled inside, pulled the curtain closed, lay in darkness listening to strangers snore. This morning, he'd live in a penthouse. Tonight, he lived in a box. His phone, the new cheap one, buzzed. Unknown number. Again, he almost didn't answer. But isolation made people desperate for any connection, even hostile ones. What? Mr. Quan. The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. My name is Officer Kong. I'm calling from the Financial Crimes Division. We'd like you to come in for questioning tomorrow at 9 a.m. About what? I think you know about what, sir. Quan's throat tightened. I don't have to answer anything. I have rights. You absolutely have rights, including the right to legal representation. Do you currently have an attorney? Silence. Mr. Quan. No. Then I suggest you find one. See you at 9 a.m. The address will be texted to this number. Pause. Oh, and Mr. Quan? Don't leave the city. We flag your passport. Click. Quan stared at the curved ceiling of his sleeping capsule. Trapped. Hunted. Alone. Every ally gone. Every advantage stripped. Every piece of armor he'd built over 15 years, peeled away layer by layer until nothing remained but the scared, small person underneath. And somewhere in the city, the people orchestrating this destruction were watching, waiting, planning the next move. While he slept in a bathhouse like a man who'd never mattered at all. Drop deserved, if this is justice, or harsh, if you think he's suffered enough. Also, would you help someone in this situation or let them face consequences alone? 3 months had passed since Neon Street. Roxy stood before a boardroom of 12 skeptical faces. Investors, philanthropists, business leaders who'd agree to hear her pitch, but clearly expected nothing impressive. After all, she was just Boss Quan's ex-wife, the pregnant woman from a scandal. What could she possibly know about running a foundation? Everything as it turned out. Abuse doesn't announce itself. Roxy began, her voice steady despite the weight of 12 sets of judging eyes. It doesn't come with warning labels or obvious signs. It comes disguised as love, as protection, as someone who claims they're helping you improve. She clicked to the first slide. Not corporate graphs or financial projections. A photo of herself from 2 years ago. Charity gala, designer dress, forced smile, Quan's hand gripping her waist possessively. This woman looks successful. Happy. Safe. Click. Next slide. The same photo zoomed in on her eyes. Fear visible if you knew to look. This woman was trapped. She just didn't know it yet. Have you ever looked back at old photos and seen things you missed in a moment? Comment if you've had that experience. The room went quiet. One woman in the back, mid-50s, expensive jewelry, CEO energy, leaned forward with sudden interest. Roxy continued. Financial abuse affects 1 in 7 women. But it's invisible. There are no bruises, no broken bones. Just empty bank accounts, forged signatures, and systematic theft disguised as handling finances together. Click. Statistics filled the screen. 99% of domestic violence cases involve financial abuse. Average time to leave, 7 attempts. Reason most women return. No money, no resources, nowhere to go. Project Phoenix addresses this directly. We provide 3 things: emergency funds, legal support, and safe housing. We help women leave before they end up like me. 7 months pregnant, thrown onto the street with nothing. She clicked to the next slide. Budget breakdown, revenue projections, partnership opportunities. The investors started taking notes. Our initial funding comes from recovered assets, money that was stolen from me and returned by my family. 93 million won dedicated entirely to this mission. We're not asking for your money today. Roxy's eyes swept the room. We're asking for your networks, your influence, your willingness to amplify this message. An older man near the front raised his hand. Ms. Steele. Roxy, she corrected gently. Roxy, this is admirable. But what makes you qualified to run an organization of this scale? The question everyone was thinking. Roxy's hand moved instinctively to her belly. 8 months pregnant now. Nola constantly reminding her that strength could grow even in hostile environments. 3 years ago, I married a man who systematically destroyed my identity while I smiled for cameras. I lost my friends, my career, my inheritance, my autonomy. Everything. Her voice didn't waver. I survived because my family had resources. Most women don't. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm qualified because I lived it. Because I understand how manipulation works from the inside. Because I know exactly what women need in order to escape. And I have the resources to provide it. Subscribe before you miss what happens when survival transforms into purpose. The CEO in the back spoke. I'll partner with you. Heads turned. Min Ji-yoon. I run Skirich Enterprises. What you described. I lived it 20 years ago. Took me 7 years to leave. Nearly killed me. Her voice cracked slightly. I'll donate facilities for your safe housing program. And I'll match your initial funding. 93 million won. Roxy's throat tightened. Ms. Yoon, call me Minji. And I'm not the only one. She looked around the table. How many of us in this room have stories we don't tell? Experiences we've buried? This isn't charity. This is paying forward the escape we barely managed. 2 other hands raised. Then 3 more. By the end of the meeting, Project Phoenix had 186 million won in committed funding, 3 facility partnerships for safe housing, legal team volunteering pro bono services, mental health professionals offering free therapy, a board of directors that understood trauma personally. After the meeting, Min Ji approached Roxy. Can we talk privately? They moved to a quiet corner. Min Ji pulled out her phone, showed Roxy a photo from 30 years ago. Young woman, bruised face, holding a child. That's me. And my daughter. Her father broke my nose 3 times before I finally left. Min Ji's eyes were steel. I built my company from nothing because I never wanted to be powerless again. But I always wondered what I could have achieved if someone had helped me escape sooner. Roxy studied the photo, saw herself in that young woman's eyes. How did you leave? My sister drove 6 hours, threw my belongings in a car, and we disappeared. I had $32 and a black eye. That was my starting point. Minji smiled sadly. Your starting point is 93 million won. You can save hundreds of women before they hit rock bottom. What if I'm not strong enough? The question slipped out before Roxy could stop it. Minji's laugh was sharp but kind. You survived, Boss Kwan. You're still standing. You're building something meaningful while carrying his child. Strength isn't what you think it is. It's not armor. It's showing up scared and doing it anyway. That evening, Roxy returned to Fortress Zero carrying paperwork and possibility. Her brothers were waiting in the sitting room. All 3, which meant they had something to say. We saw the pitch, Titan began. Roxy's stomach dropped. Ow! Min Ji-yoon's daughter works in our finance department. She mentioned the meeting. Ghost's expression was unreadable. Congratulations. You're not upset I'm using the recovered money? Upset. Viper laughed. Little sister, we're impressed. You could have taken that money and disappeared. Instead, you built something bigger than revenge. Titan pulled out a folder. We have a proposal. The steel conglomerate will establish Project Phoenix as a subsidiary. Full operational independence. But you'll have access to our legal team, our facilities, our global network. If someone offered to amplify your dream by 1,000%, would you accept help or insist on doing alone? Roxy looked at the folder, at her brothers' faces. What? Because you're right, Ghost said quietly. What happened to you happens to thousands of women, and we have the resources to actually change that. There's one condition, Titan added. Here it comes, Roxy thought. The control. The strings attached. You run it, Titan continued. Not us. Not our people. You. We provide infrastructure. You provide vision. Deal. Roxy's eyes burned. Deal. Viper stood, crossed to her, pulled her into a careful hug that accommodated her belly. You're going to change lives, Rox. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. And Quan? Roxy asked. What happens to him? The brothers exchanged glances. Tomorrow, Titan said. He has an appointment with law enforcement. By the end of the week, criminal charges will be filed. By the end of the month, he'll be facing trial. Good. But more importantly, Ghost added, by then, you'll have helped your first woman escape. You'll have turned your pain into someone else's freedom. That's better than any revenge we could have designed. Roxy looked down at her belly. Nola kicked, strong, persistent, demanding to be acknowledged. Your daughter's going to grow up watching you build empires, Viper said. Not the kind built on fear. The kind built on making sure fear stops winning. That night, Roxy wrote her first blog post for the Foundation website on being thrown away and choosing to rise. 3 months ago, I sat on Neon Street in the rain, pregnant and discarded. Today, I pitched a foundation to 12 strangers and secured funding to help women escape the same trap I survived. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about transformation. They try to make me small. Instead, I became larger than their cruelty. If you're reading this from inside your own cage, know this. The key was always in your hand. You just needed someone to remind you how to use it. Project Phoenix launches next month. We're ready when you are. She hit publish. Within an hour, 5,000 views. By morning, 200,000 views. By the end of the week, viral across every platform. Women started reaching out, asking for help, sharing their own stories. The movement had begun. The Seoul Metropolitan Police headquarters smelled like industrial cleaner and broken promises. Quan sat in interview room 3, metal chair bolted to the floor, table scarred from decades of confessions. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. One flickered rhythmically, creating a strobe effect that made his headache worse. 2 detectives sat across from him. Detective Choi, 40s, professional, the kind of cop who'd seen every lie. And Detective Nam, younger, hungry, probably hoping this case would make her career. Have you ever sat across from someone who held your future in their hands? That moment when you realize talking might destroy you, but silence might be worse? Thank you for coming in voluntarily, Detective Choi began, though they all knew voluntary was generous. We have some questions about financial irregularities in your business operations. Kwan's lawyer, court-appointed, barely competent, leaned over and whispered, Don't volunteer information. Answer only what's asked. I haven't done anything illegal, Kwan said. Di nams my. Not friendly. Predatory? Then this should be quick. She slid a folder across the table. Quan opened it. Bank statements. His signature on transfer forms. Dates matching deposits into accounts he'd never disclosed. Can you explain these transactions? Detective Nam asked. Those are business expenses. Legal. Documented. Are they? Detective Choi pulled out another file. Because according to our forensic accountant, 17 of these signatures are forgeries. Not bad forgeries, but the pressure points are wrong. The angle inconsistent. Someone traced your signature rather than signing naturally. Kwan's mouth went dry. That's impossible. Is it? Detective Nam leaned forward. Or did someone with intimate access to your documents forge your signature to create paper trails that would eventually implicate you? The realization hit like cold water. Suki. She'd set him up. Months of forged documents creating evidence of crimes he didn't commit, or at least didn't commit in the ways these files suggested. I want to... He turned to his lawyer. Can they do this? His lawyer looked exhausted. They can show you evidence during questioning. If you want to stop, we can end this interview. We can, Detective Choi agreed. But the charges are being filed regardless. Cooperation might help your case. Subscribe before you miss what happens when the trap you built for someone else springs on you instead. Kwan's hands trembled. What charges? Detective Nam consulted her tablet. Fraud, forgery, theft, money laundering, coercion, and we're still investigating potential charges related to domestic abuse, though that's being handled by a different department. I never heard her, Kwan said automatically. Physically? Maybe not. Detective Choi's voice went cold. But emotional abuse, financial control, isolation, those are increasingly recognized as forms of violence. And thanks to Ms. Rivers' article, we have documentation going back 3 years. He slid another folder across. This one was thicker. Kwan opened it. Audio transcripts, text messages, financial records showing systematic control of Roxy's access to money, medical records accessed without consent, property sold using forged signatures. Every crime documented with timestamps and evidence. Here's what we think happened, Detective Choi said. You married Roxana Steele. You systematically isolated her from friends and family. You stole her inheritance, 23 million won from her grandmother's estate. You forged her signature on property sales. You controlled every aspect of her financial life while maintaining a public image of being a devoted husband. That's not. And when she became pregnant, Detective Nam continued, you decided she was no longer useful. So you orchestrated her humiliation and discarded her in one of the most dangerous parts of Seorim. 7 months pregnant. At night. In the rain. The room felt smaller. Hotter. The flickering light overhead seemed to accelerate. Where are you getting this information? Kwan demanded. Multiple sources. Some anonymous. Some not. Detective Choi steepled his fingers. But the real question isn't where we got it. The question is, can you prove any of it is false? Silence. Because he couldn't. Every document they'd shown him was real. Every transaction happened. The signatures might be forged, but the actions were his. I think, his lawyer started. Who's doing this? Kwan interrupted, his voice rising. Who's feeding you this information? Someone's orchestrating this. Someone with resources. Someone who wants me destroyed. Are you suggesting there's a conspiracy against you? Detective Nam's eyebrow raised. Yes, obviously. Look at the timing. My account's frozen. My businesses seized this article. Now this interrogation. Someone's coordinating all of it. If everything in your life collapsed in perfect sequence, would you see a pattern or just bad luck? Comment your honest answer. Let's say you're right. Detective Choi said calmly. Let's say someone is orchestrating your downfall. Does that make the evidence false? Does that mean you didn't commit these acts? Kwan's mouth opened, closed, because the detective was right. Even if someone was destroying him, they were doing it by exposing things he'd actually done. The forgeries he tried are being investigated separately, Detective Nam said. But even if we remove every forged signature, you're still left with theft, coercion, and abuse. The forgeries might be someone setting you up, but the foundation they built on, that was all you. The lawyer cleared his throat. Detectives, my client has cooperated. If you're going to charge him, we are. Detective Choi pulled out a formal document. Boss Kwan Ji-young, you're being charged with 7 counts of financial fraud, 4 counts of forgery, 2 counts of theft exceeding 10 million won, and 1 count of coercive control. You'll appear before a judge for arraignment tomorrow at 2 p.m. The room spun. Bail, his lawyer asked weakly. Given the defendant's resources, or former resources, and the serious nature of the charges, we'll be recommending remand in custody pending trial, which meant jail. Not house arrest in a luxury penthouse. Not monitored release. Actualidad. This is insane, Kwan whispered. No, Mr. Kwan. Detective Nam stood, gathering her files. This is consequences. Welcome to the part where actions have them. They processed him at 3:47 p.m. Fingerprints. Photographs. Strip search. Orange jumpsuit that smelled like despair and previous inmates. The holding cell was 8 feet by 6 feet. Metal toilet. Thin mattress on a concrete platform. One small window with reinforced glass showing a slice of gray sky. 3 other men shared the space. One ignored him. One stared with predatory interest. The third recognized him. Your boss, Kwan. He didn't answer. My cousin worked for you. Said you were ruthless. Fired him for being 10 minutes late. The man laughed bitterly. Look at you now. Kwan sat on the edge of the mattress, if you could call it that, and stared at his hands. These hands had signed contracts worth millions. Had gripped Roxy's waist too tight at 100 events. Had held her down while someone cut her hair. Had thrown her into the street. Now they were just hands. No power. No authority. Just flesh and bone waiting for judgment. A guard appeared at the cell door. Kwan, you have a visitor. Who? Didn't say. Legal consultation room. 5 minutes. They escorted him through fluorescent hallways to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. A man sat waiting, 40s expensive suit, calm eyes. Mr. Kwan, my name is Attorney Park. I've been assigned to review your case. By who? That's confidential. But I've examined the evidence against you. He opened a briefcase, pulled out files. I'm going to be honest. This is bad. Multiple charges, substantial evidence, high-profile scandal. Any jury will have heard about the article. Can you get me out? On bail. Unlikely. The prosecution will argue flight risk, and given your, shall we say, former connections, they'll convince a judge. So what do I do? Attorney Park leaned back. You cooperate. You acknowledge wrongdoing. You demonstrate remorse. You hope the judge shows mercy. And if I don't, then you spend the next decade in prison watching your life become a cautionary tale about unchecked power and domestic cruelty. He closed the briefcase. Your choice, Mr. Kwan, but choose quickly. Arraignment is tomorrow. After that, the narrative is set. He left. Kwan sat alone in the consultation room, surrounded by cinder block walls painted institutional beige. Outside these walls, a city that once bowed to him. Inside these walls, nothing but consequences he'd spent years pretending didn't exist. Go sat in a room that technically didn't exist. Subbasement level 7. below Fortress Zero's wine cellar, below the server rooms, below even the war room where his brothers plotted corporate takeovers. This was where Ghost did his real work. 27 monitors glowed in the darkness. Each screen showed a different angle of Boss Quan's destruction. Financial records, police interrogation footage, media coverage, social media sentiment analysis, real-time tracking of everyone who'd ever worked with him. Ghost watched it all with the detached focus of someone playing chess 3 moves ahead of reality. If you could see every move your enemy would make before they made it, would you feel powerful or just tired of how predictable everyone is? His phone buzzed. Titan. Status? His brother asked. Quan was arraigned 2 hours ago. Bail denied. He's in Seoul Detention Center, cell block C. Isolated from general population for his own safety. Former crime bosses don't do well in prison. Good. And Suki, Singapore. We're monitoring but not interfering. She's broke, paranoid, and running from shadows that aren't even chasing her anymore. Living punishment. The forgeries? Ghost pulled up a specific file. Suki created 17 forged documents. We discovered them months ago, but let them remain. They serve our purpose, made Quan look guilty of things he actually did, just with paperwork that had technical problems. Law enforcement is examining them, but ultimately won't throw out the case. The foundation of evidence is solid. Lexi Rivers, still writing follow-up articles. The story has legs. She's being considered for awards. Titan was quiet for 3 seconds. And Roxy, Ghost switch monitors. Security feed from Project Phoenix's new headquarters, a restored building in downtown CRM. Roxy stood in the main office, 8 months pregnant, directing contractors and meeting with potential clients. She's thriving. Project Phoenix officially launches next week. They've already received over 300 applications for assistance. Min Ji-yoon is proving to be an excellent partner. Good. Titan's voice softened slightly. Make sure she has everything she needs. Already done. I've allocated additional resources to the Foundation's security. Viper's team is monitoring for threats. Any blowback from Quan's associates? They're all too busy saving themselves. Baron Lee is cooperating with investigators to reduce his own exposure. Jung-hwan fled to Japan. Detective Park took early retirement. Everyone who touched Quan's organization is contaminated. Ghost leaned back in his chair, studying the web of connections displayed across his screens. Thousands of threads connecting people, companies, accounts. And at the center, where Boss Quan used to sit, nothing. A void where a man used to be. Subscribe before you miss how complete destruction can look like making someone simply cease to matter. There's one more thing, Ghost said. I found something in Dad's files. The original contract from 20 years ago. And Dad's notes in the margins. He knew Ryu's successor would eventually abuse power. He built in fail-safes specifically for that scenario, including provisions that revert all assets if family members are harmed. So when Quan hurt Roxy, he triggered a contract clause that predated his entire empire. He destroyed himself the moment he touched her. He just didn't know it for 3 years. Titan laughed quietly. Dad was playing a long game. Dad was always playing a long game. We just finally got to see the end game. Ghost's youngest monitor chimed. New alert. He pulled up the feed. Quan's detention cell. Live footage. Quan sat on his bunk, head in hands. One of his cellmates, a man awaiting trial for embezzlement, was talking to him, though Ghost couldn't hear the conversation. He enabled audio. Heard you that crime boss from the news. The one who threw his pregnant wife away. Quan didn't respond. My daughter's pregnant. 22. Working 2 jobs to save for the baby. The man's voice was quiet, reflective. I'm in here because I stole money from my company. Thought I deserved it. Thought I was smarter than everyone else. Still no response from Quan. But you? Man, what you did. That a different kind of theft. You stole her life, her choices, her dignity. And for what? Another woman? Money? Power? You don't understand. Quan finally spoke. His voice was hollow, defeated. You're right. I don't. Because I wouldn't throw away someone who loved me. The man lay back on his bunk. They're saying you might get 15 years. Probably less with good behavior. But that woman, your ex-wife, she got a life sentence of knowing the person who was supposed to protect her destroyed her instead. Quan curled tighter, making himself smaller. Ghost watched him passively. This was the outcome they'd orchestrated. Not through violence, not through direct confrontation, but through the slow, methodical dismantling of everything Quan valued. And the beautiful part? Almost none of it was illegal. They'd simply removed their support from an empire that was always theirs. Pulled the foundation and let gravity do the rest. If you could destroy someone without ever touching them, just by removing the support systems they never knew they relied on, would that be justice or just strategy? Ghost's phone buzzed again. This time, Viper. Need you in the medical wing. Roxy's asking questions. About how much we actually controlled. She's not stupid, Ghost. She's starting to connect dots. Ghost stood, stretching muscles that had been still for 6 hours. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He took one last look at the monitors. At Quan in his cell. At Suki in Singapore. At the hundreds of people whose lives intersected with this story. All of them moving through paths Ghost had designed without ever knowing the architect existed. That's what real power looked like. Not thrones and titles. Not fear and violence. Just the quiet ability to rewrite someone's entire reality and have them believe it was fate. In the medical wing, Roxy sat with Dr. Cobalt, finishing her evening checkup. Ghost entered silently. Roxy looked up, and he saw calculation in her eyes. She'd inherited that from their father, the ability to see patterns others missed. Nola's heartbeat is strong, Dr. Cobalt reported. You're cleared for normal activity, though I'd avoid stress for the next few weeks as you approach your due date. Thank you. Roxy waited until Dr. Cobalt left, then turned to Ghost. I need to ask you something. Ask. How much of Quan's fall was engineered versus natural consequences? Ghost had been expecting this question for weeks. His sister was smart. Too smart to believe everything happened organically. Define engineered. Don't do that. Her voice was firm. Not angry. Just determined. Don't answer questions with questions. I want the truth. Ghost sat across from her. We removed our financial support from the Ryu Syndicate. That was intentional. The rest, the article, the investigation, the social collapse, those were natural outcomes of exposing truth. But you fed Lexi Rivers that information. We provided access to documents that already existed. She chose what to publish. And Suki. Suki was always going to betray him. We just didn't stop her. Roxy studied her brother's face. So you orchestrated circumstances, but let people make their own choices within those circumstances. Essentially, that's still manipulation. It is, Ghost agreed. But consider the alternative. We could have killed him. Viper wanted to. It would have been cleaner, faster, permanent. But you said you wanted him to understand what he'd done. To face consequences. To live with his choices. And you gave me that. We gave you justice without blood. We dismantled him using truth and strategic removal of support. Is that manipulation? Yes. But it's manipulation in service of accountability. If someone manipulated circumstances to give you justice, would you accept it or reject it because the method wasn't pure? Comment your genuine answer. Roxy's hand moved to her belly. And the Steele family connection to the Ryu syndicate? Dad's original involvement. That's more complicated. Dad invested in criminal enterprises as a hedge against corporate warfare. He understood that legitimate business and underground networks often overlap. He made strategic alliances to protect the family. And Quan never knew. Quan never asked. He inherited a throne and assumed he'd earned it. Pride made him blind to the foundations supporting him. Silence fell between them. Outside the medical wing, Fortress Zero hummed with life. Security systems, climate control, the machinery of power functioning invisibly. Finally, Roxy spoke. I am grateful for everything you've done, but I need to know, are you going to do this for Nola? Manipulate her life from the shadows to keep her safe. Ghost's expression softened. Rare for him. That's your choice to make. We'll follow your lead. Promise. Promise. Roxy nodded. Then thank you for saving me, for destroying him without making me watch violence, for giving me the space to rebuild. She stood, preparing to leave, then paused at the door. One more question. Yes. If I hadn't messaged you that night on Neon Street, how long would you have waited? Ghost's silence was answer enough. You would have intervened eventually, Roxy said. It wasn't a question. We would have, but it wouldn't have been on your terms. And you needed to choose your own escape. He met her eyes. Freedom only means something if you claim it yourself. Roxy smiled, small, sad, but genuine. That's the most philosophical thing I've ever heard you say. Don't tell Viper. He thinks I'm a robot brother. She laughed, and the sound reminded Ghost why they'd done all of this. Not for revenge, not for power, for the chance to hear his sister laugh again. Quan had been in Seoul Detention Center for 11 days. 11 days of fluorescent lights that never fully turned off. 11 days of food that tasted like cardboard and regret. 11 days of sharing 8 square meters with 3 other men whose crimes felt smaller than his. His court-appointed attorney visited on day 12. Attorney Park looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from defending cases you know are unwinnable. We need to discuss your options, he said, sliding a folder across the metal table between them. What options? Quan's voice was rough from disuse. He'd stopped talking to his cellmates after the 3rd day. Stopped talking to anyone, really. Plea bargain. The prosecution is offering 8 years with possibility of parole in 5 if you plead guilty to the financial crimes and acknowledge wrongdoing regarding your treatment of your ex-wife. 8 years. Quan would be 52 when he got out. Middle-aged. Irrelevant. The world would have forgotten him. And if I don't take it, trial. High profile. Media circus. Every detail of your abuse documented and displayed publicly. And if you lose, which you will, you're looking at 15 to 20 years. Attorney Park leaned forward. Take the deal, Mr. Quan. It's the best you're going to get. If someone offered you 8 years in prison or 20 years fighting a battle you couldn't win, which would you choose? Comment your honest answer. I need to think. You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires. Attorney Park stood to leave, then paused. There's something else. An anonymous package arrived at my office this morning. Addressed to you. He pulled an envelope from his briefcase. Thick. Manila. No return address. What is it? I don't know. I didn't open it. Attorney-client privilege. But whoever sent it wanted you to have it before you decided on the plea. He left the envelope on the table and walked away. Quan stared at it. Plain envelope. His name typed on the front. Nothing threatening about it except the timing. Someone wanted him to know something before he made his choice. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, a single document. Old. The kind that had been scanned, preserved, treated like evidence. Contract of investment. Parties. Steel Holdings, party of the first part. RYU Syndicate, party of the second part. Date, March 15th, 2010. Kwan's vision blurred. He blinked, refocused, kept reading. The contract outlined investment terms. 200 million won in exchange for 40% ownership and veto power over major decisions. Standard venture capital agreement. Except this wasn't venture capital. This was the foundation of his entire empire. And the investors weren't anonymous Hong Kong businessmen like Baron Lee had claimed. They were the Steele family, Roxy's family. Subscribe before you miss what happens when someone discovers their entire life was built on borrowed authority. His hand shook so badly the paper rattled. He kept reading, desperate to find something that contradicted what he was seeing. Clause 7. Controlling interest. The party of the first part maintains controlling interest in perpetuity. Boss Ryu De Jong and all successors operate under license granted by and revocable at the sole discretion of controlling shareholders. Successors. He was a successor, which meant Clause 12. Breach of contract. In the event of breach, including but not limited to abuse of family members, theft of assets belonging to controlling shareholders, or actions deemed detrimental to investor interests, all holdings revert to original shareholders immediately and without recourse. Abuse of family members. Roxy was a family member. He'd abused Roxy, which triggered the breach clause, which meant the paper slipped from his numb fingers, scattered across the metal table like evidence of his own stupidity. He'd spent 3 years married to the sister of the men who owned him, the sister of the invisible kings who'd funded the syndicate he'd inherited, the sister of the people who controlled his entire existence. And he'd thrown her away. Clause 15. Remedies. Upon breach, controlling shareholders reserve the right to freeze assets, seize properties, terminate business relationships, and pursue legal remedies including criminal prosecution. Everything that had happened, the frozen accounts, the seized properties, the investigation, the social collapse, wasn't random. It was contractual, written into the foundation of his empire 15 years before he'd ever met Roxy. His father-in-law had built a trap, and Kwan had walked into it the moment he raised his hand to the man's daughter. If you discovered the person you'd hurt had family powerful enough to destroy you legally, would you feel fear or just resignation? A second page fell from the envelope. Not part of the contract. A printed note. You married into the family that owns you. You abused their daughter. The contract has specific remedies for this scenario. Everything that's happening to you was designed 20 years ago by people who understood that power corrupts and needed insurance. You were never a king, Kwan. You were an employee, and you just violated the terms of your employment. The Steele family sends their regards. Kwan's world tilted violently. He gripped the edge of the table, trying to breathe, trying to process. Every deal he'd made, approved by them. Every territory he'd claimed, allowed by them. Every dollar he'd earned, ultimately theirs. The Jade Spire penthouse, leased through a company they controlled. The Crimson Lounge, built on land they owned. His cars, his clothes, his entire identity as Boss Kwan, all constructed on a foundation he'd never bothered to investigate. And Roxy, quiet, gentle Roxy who he dismissed as weak and powerless. She'd been royalty walking among peasants, and he'd been too arrogant to see it. He'd courted her thinking he was elevating her status, making her somebody by attaching his name to hers. Reality, she'd been slumming, dating down, probably ignoring her brother's warnings that he wasn't worthy. And when he'd finally shown his true nature, when he'd abused, controlled, and discarded her. He'd trigger a response mechanism built into contracts he didn't know existed. The Steele family hadn't attacked him. They'd simply stopped supporting him, removed the invisible scaffolding that held his empire upright, and watched gravity do the rest. Comment karma if you think the contract clause was brilliant or planned, if you think this was always going to end this way. A guard appeared at the consultation room door. Time's up. Back to your cell. Quan gathered the papers with numb fingers. Can I keep these? Attorney documents? Yeah, but no sharing with other inmates. He was escorted back to cell block C. His cellmates looked up as he entered. You okay, man? The embezzler asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. Quan sat on his bunk, contract pages clutched in his hands like evidence of his own execution. I just learned, he said quietly, that I spent 3 years married to someone whose family could erase me with a phone call, and I treated her like she was nothing. Damn, the embezzler whistled. That's biblical levels of bad judgment. Quan laughed. It came out broken, bitter. The sound of someone who'd finally understood the punchline of a joke told at his expense. You don't even know the half of it. He lay back on the thin mattress, staring at concrete ceiling, holding papers that proved every assumption he'd built his life on was false. Tomorrow, he'd tell Attorney Park to accept the plea deal. 8 years. It was more mercy than he deserved, and infinitely more than the Steele family needed to give him. 3 days after receiving the contract, Quan made a decision that would be his last act as the man he used to be. He needed to see her, not to apologize. Apologies felt meaningless after what he'd done. Not to beg for forgiveness, he didn't deserve it, but to look Roxy in the eyes and acknowledge what he'd finally understood. She'd been the powerful one all along. His attorney arranged temporary release for a family emergency meeting, a legal fiction that cost Quan's remaining assets to secure. 4 hours of supervised freedom, one chance to say what needed saying. A police transport van drove him north from Seoul. 2 hours through mountains. Guard chains rattled every time the van hit a bump, reminding him he was cargo now, not a person. They arrived at coordinates that led to nothing. Just trees, mountains, a dirt road that disappeared into forest. This can't be right, the supervising officer said, checking his GPS. Then the trees moved. Not metaphorically. Actual trees. Camouflage barriers disguised as natural landscape, parted to reveal a gate. Reinforced steel. Security cameras. Guard posts with personnel carrying military-grade weapons. The officer's radio crackled. A voice. State your business. Prisoner transport. Kwon Ji-young requesting meeting with Roxana Steele. We have authorization from. We know who you are. And the answer is no. Have you ever been turned away from a place you desperately needed to reach? Comment if you know that specific powerlessness. We have legal authorization, the officer insisted. Your authorization means nothing here. This is private property. You're trespassing. Turn around or face consequences. The officer looked at Kwon through the metal grate, separating them. I can't force entry onto private land. Please. Kwon's voice cracked. I just need 5 minutes. Just to explain. The radio crackled again. Different voice. Male. Cold. Refined. Titan steel. Mr. Kwon, I'm going to speak slowly so you understand. You are not welcome at Fortress Zero. You will not see my sister. You will not speak to her. You will not breathe the same air as her daughter. I know what I did. You know nothing. You damaged our sister for 3 years while wearing a wedding ring like it gave you ownership. Now you want closure? Redemption? One last conversation so you can feel better about being a monster. Quan pressed against the metal grate. I deserve to face her, to own what I did. Titan's laugh was ice. You don't deserve anything. And my sister doesn't need your confession. She spent 3 months in therapy learning that your actions weren't her fault. Your presence would undo that work. Then let me speak to you, face to face, not through a radio. Silence for 10 seconds. Then, you want to speak to me? Yes. Fine. Exit the vehicle. Hands visible. Any sudden movements, and you'll be ventilated before you hit the ground. The officer unlocked Quan's restraints. Chains only, keeping his hands cuffed. Quan stepped out onto gravel, blinking in afternoon sunlight. The gate opened. 3 men stood 50 meters away. Titan, Ghost, Viper, the Steel brothers in person, not just voices on phones or shadows in stories. They looked nothing like Quan expected. No designer suites. No obvious weapons. Just 3 men in casual clothes, standing with the confidence of people who'd never needed to prove their power. Subscribe before you miss what happens when borrowed authority finally meets real power. Quan walked forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. When he reached them, he stopped at a respectful distance. Viper looked ready to attack. Ghost looked through him like he wasn't there. Titan simply waited. I came to. Quan's throat closed. I understand now. About the contract. About who you are. About what I did. Good for you, Viper said flatly. You figured it out. Want a medal? I want to make it right. There is no making this right. Titan's voice never rose. Never needed to. You can't unforgive signatures. Can't uncut hair. Can't give back 3 years of her life you stole while pretending you loved her. I did love her. In my own. Don't. Ghost spoke for the first time. One word. Absolute. Don't rewrite history. You loved owning her. There's a difference. Quan's hands trembled. How do I fix this? You don't, Titan said. You serve your time. You stay away from her forever. You never speak her name again. You become the cautionary tale she uses to help other women recognize predators. That's it? I just disappear? That's generous, Viper growled. What I wanted to do involved less talking and more shallow graves. Viper, Titan warned. But she said no violence. Viper's smile was sharp. Dangerous. So instead you get to live. In a cell. Knowing you had everything and threw it away because you couldn't stand letting someone else have power. Quan looked between the 3 brothers. Saw his future reflected in their eyes. Prison, parole, obscurity. A footnote in someone else's triumph story. Can I at least know she's okay? What? Ghost tilted his head. So you can sleep better? So you can tell yourself the damage wasn't permanent. Because Quan stopped. Because he what? Cared? After everything he'd done, claiming to care was obscene. She's better than okay, Titan said. She's thriving. She launched a foundation that's already helped 43 women escape situations like the one you put her in. She's 8.5 months pregnant with a daughter who will grow up knowing her worth because her mother learned hers. Each word landed like a blade. And you, Titan continued, you're a name she mentions in interviews as my abusive ex-husband without even using your real name. You've become the anonymous villain in her hero story. That's your legacy, not the empire you thought you built, just the obstacle she overcame. If you became the villain in someone else's success story, would you accept it or keep fighting to be seen differently? Drop your answer. Quan's knees buckled. He caught himself barely. I'm sorry. Tell that to a therapist. Tell that to your cellmates. Tell it to your ceiling at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep. Viper stepped closer, but never say it to her, because sorry doesn't fix what you broke. It just makes you feel better about breaking it. The gate began closing. Wait, Quan reached out. Ghost caught his wrist. Gentle, controlled. But the message was clear. This is the last time we speak. The last time you come near anything my sister cares about. If you violate that, if you try to contact her after your release, if you speak to media about her, if you so much as Google her name, Viper's first instinct becomes our official position. He released Quan's wrist. Are we clear? Quan nodded, throat too tight for words. The three brothers turned and walked back through the gate. It closed with the finality of a coffin lid. Quan stood on the wrong side of the barrier, staring at trees that looked natural but hid cameras, sensors, and people who'd ended him without ever raising their voices. The officer touched his shoulder. We need to go. Yeah. Quan let himself be led back to the transport van, back to chains and metal and the cell where he'd spend the next 8 years. As they drove away, he looked back once. Fortress Zero had disappeared completely. Camouflage barriers slid back into place. Trees that weren't really trees became trees again, like it had never existed, like he'd imagined the whole thing, except for the weight in his chest that felt like understanding arriving 8 years too late. 8 months later, morning sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows of the Haven, Roxy's new home overlooking Seram's eastern skyline. She'd chosen this location deliberately, high enough to see the city, far enough to never have to navigate the streets where Quan had paraded her like a trophy, close enough to the Project Phoenix headquarters that she could walk to work once Nola was old enough for daycare. Speaking of Nola, the 6-month-old lay on a playmat, reaching for hanging toys with the kind of determination that reminded Roxy of her brothers. Dark hair, fierce eyes, tiny fists that grabbed everything within reach and refused to let go. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be? Comment below. I'm genuinely curious. She's got your fighting spirit, Dr. Cobalt said, finishing the routine checkup. Perfect health. Strong. Developing exactly as expected. She gets that from her uncles, Roxy replied, watching Nola kick enthusiastically. The steel's stubbornness runs deep. And from you, Dr. Cobalt packed her medical bag. Don't sell yourself short. You survived what would have destroyed most people. Roxy didn't respond immediately. Just watch her daughter, the unexpected gift that came from her worst experience. The apartment door opened. Titan entered carrying flat-pack furniture boxes, followed by Ghost with tools, and Viper directing contractors with the intensity of a military operation. Crib goes in the nursery, Viper instructed, and if there's a single sharp edge left exposed, we're returning it and finding something else. It's baby furniture, one contractor protested. It's designed for babies. Viper's stare could have melted steel. And my niece is more valuable than your opinion. Fix it. The contractor quickly retreated. Roxy laughed, the first real, unforced laugh she'd had in years. Watching her 3 terrifying brothers obsess over crib assembly while Nola drooled on a play mat felt surreal and perfect. You know I can hire people do this, she said. We know. Titan unboxed a changing table. But then we wouldn't get to inspect their work and reject it 17 times. Ghost was already assembling the crib with the precision of someone who'd built intelligence networks across continents. Besides, it's therapeutic. Viper threatened 6 people today. That's down from his usual 12. Progress, Viper muttered, testing the structural integrity of a dresser drawer. Roxy moved to the window, Nola in her arms. The city sprawled beneath them. Millions of lives intersecting, separating, continuing. Somewhere down there, Quan sat in a prison cell. She'd stopped following the news about his case after the sentencing. 8 years. Possibility of parole in 5. It didn't matter anymore. He'd become irrelevant. not through hatred or revenge, but through the simple act of building something better. Subscribe so you never miss what happens when revenge becomes unnecessary because living well already won. Roxy, Titan's voice pulled her back. You okay? Yeah. She turned from the window, just thinking about how different this is from what I imagined my life would look like. Titan set down the furniture piece he'd been assembling. Better or worse? Different. She looked at her brothers, men who'd tracked her through 3 years of abuse, waiting for the moment she'd choose freedom. I thought happiness looked like a husband, a penthouse, society events. Turns out it looks like my daughter, this apartment, and 3 overprotective brothers assembling furniture incorrectly. We're not assembling it incorrectly, Ghost protested. The instructions say step 4 happens before step 3, Roxy pointed out. Instructions are suggestions. Nola made a noise, half giggle, half squeal. Everyone froze. Did she just... Viper moved closer. Laugh, Roxy confirmed. She definitely laughed. All 3 brothers immediately abandoned furniture assembly to crowd around the baby, making ridiculous faces trying to get her to laugh again. Titan, Ghost, Viper, men who moved markets and dismantled empires, reduced to baby entertainment. Roxy's phone buzzed. Email from Sky, the magazine writer covering Project Phoenix. Subject, feature article going live tomorrow. She opened it. The article preview showed, out of the ashes, how Roxana Steele rebuilt her life and empire. The photos were striking. Roxy at the foundation headquarters. Roxy with clients who'd escaped abuse. Roxy holding Nola while signing documents that freed another woman for financial prison. Not victim photos. Survivor photos. Victor photos. The article opened with a quote. They try to make me small. Instead, I became larger than their cruelty. This isn't a story about what was taken from me. It's about what I built with what remained. If someone wrote your story, what would the opening line be? Drop it in the comments. Roxy forwarded the article to Min Ji-yoon, her partner in Project Phoenix. Response came immediately. MING. Beautiful. We're changing lives, Roxy. 43 women in 8 months. That's 43 families who didn't collapse. 43 futures that stayed open. Roxy, because you believed in me when this was just an idea in a journal. MING, because you turned pain into purpose. That's rare. Don't let anyone minimize what you've accomplished. Roxy set the phone down, looking at the space she'd created. Minimalist furniture. Neutral colors. Nothing like the oppressive luxury of the Jade Spire penthouse. This place was hers. Chosen. Designed. Controlled. No one dictated her schedule. No one monitored her spending. No one needed to approve her choices. Freedom looked quieter than she'd expected. Less dramatic. Just the simple ability to exist without fear. That evening, after her brothers left and Nola slept, Roxy opened her journal. The same one she'd started writing in 3 months ago. She'd filled 2 journals since then, pages and pages of processing, healing, planning. Tonight's entry. Things I've learned about power. Real power doesn't announce itself. Real power is being able to walk away from people who need you to stay. Real power is building something that helps others instead of trapping them. Real power is watching your abuser face consequences while you're too busy thriving to care. She paused, pen hovering over paper, then added, real power is being grateful for the experience that broke you because it revealed who you actually are, not who they wanted you to be, who you always were underneath. She closed the journal. Tomorrow, the article would publish. Her story would go public in her own words, on her own terms. Not as Boss Kwan's ex-wife, not as a victim, but as Roxana Steele, founder of Project Phoenix, mother to Nola, sister to men who'd moved mountains for her, and woman who'd learned that sometimes the best revenge is refusing to let destruction be the end of your story. Nola made a soft sound from the nursery. Roxy moved to the doorway, watching her daughter sleep. "You'll grow up safe," she whispered. "Loved, powerful. You'll know your worth before anyone tries to teach you worthlessness. And if someone ever tries to make you small." She smiled. "Your mother and uncles will remind them why that's a very bad idea." 6 months later, Kwan sat in the prison library, surrounded by legal textbooks he barely understood. 18 months into his sentence. 6.5 years remaining if he maintained good behavior. The days blurred together. Same routine, same food, same four walls. But today was different. Today, someone left a magazine on his table. CRM Business Quarterly. Cover story: The Phoenix Foundation, 1 year of changing lives. The cover photo showed Roxy at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Confident, radiant, holding Nola, now 1 year old, while surrounded by women whose faces glowed with gratitude. The headline underneath: How Roxana Steele Built an Empire from Ashes and Saved 127 Women in the Process. When someone you hurt moves on and thrives without you, does it hurt more or less than if they stayed broken? Be honest in the comments. Kwan's hands trembled as he opened the magazine. The article was comprehensive. Photos of the foundation headquarters, a restored building in downtown CRM that had once been a women's shelter. Now it was state-of-the-art. Legal offices, financial counseling rooms, therapy spaces, temporary housing for women escaping abuse. Excerpt: Roxana Steele doesn't flinch when describing her abusive marriage. "He isolated me systematically," she says, bouncing her daughter on her knee. "Replaced my friends, control my money, made me believe I was lucky he chose me." Classic manipulation. But what makes Steele's story remarkable isn't the abuse. Tragically, that's common. It's what she built afterward. Project Phoenix has helped 127 women leave financially abusive situations, provided emergency funds totaling $847 million, secured legal victories in 43 custody cases, created a network that catches women before they fall. Kwan kept reading, each paragraph a knife. Excerpt: I ask her if she's angry at her ex-husband. She considers the question carefully. "Anger is exhausting," she finally says. "I was angry for months, furious at what he stole. But anger kept me tethered to him emotionally. The real freedom came when I stopped caring what happened to him, when his existence became irrelevant to my happiness." She gestures around the foundation. "This is revenge enough. Every woman we help is proof that he didn't win. That cruelty doesn't get the last word. That's more satisfying than any apology he could offer." The magazine slipped from Kwan's hands. She'd stopped caring. Not forgiven, but not forgotten. Not moved on, but still hurt. Actually, genuinely stopped caring. He'd become a footnote. The bad chapter in someone else's success story. The article continued with testimonials from women the foundation had helped. "They saved my life. Literally. I was planning my exit strategy when Project Phoenix gave me the money to leave safely. 3 months later, I have an apartment, a job, and my kids are thriving." Roxana understands because she lived it. There's no judgment, no scum. Just here are resources, here's support, you deserve better. That changes everything. My ex-husband controlled every dollar. When I found Project Phoenix, They helped me document his financial abuse and recover my stolen inheritance. He's facing charges now. I'm rebuilding. 127 women. 127 lives changed because Roxy had transformed trauma into action. Subscribe before you miss the final realization that success is always the best answer to those who try to stop you. A guard appeared at the library entrance. Quan, you have a visitor. His heart jumped. Maybe. No, not Roxy. She'd made it clear through her brothers that he didn't exist to her anymore. He followed the guard to the visitation room, sat at the designated booth. His mother appeared on the other side of the glass. She looked older, tired, the kind of tired that comes from watching your child self-destruct. Mom. She picked up the phone. He did the same. I saw the article, she said without preamble. About your ex-wife. About what she's built. Yeah. You destroyed that woman. Quan flinched. I know. And she took what you broke and made it into something that helps people. While you sit here feeling sorry for yourself. His mother's voice was sharp. Disappointed. I didn't raise you to be cruel. I'm not. You are. You were. And now you're paying for it. She leaned closer to the glass. I want you to understand something. When you get out, if you get out on good behavior, you don't contact her. You don't attempt reconciliation. You don't send letters or gifts or apologies. I wasn't planning. You let her live. You let her daughter grow up not knowing your name. You become the lesson she teaches other women about recognizing red flags. His mother's eyes were steel. That's your redemption. Not grand gestures. Just absence. She stood to leave. Mom, wait. I've spent 18 months telling my friends my son is away on business. Because admitting the truth that you abused a pregnant woman and destroyed yourself is too humiliating. She placed her hand against the glass. Not affection. Goodbye. I'll visit again in 6 months. Maybe by then you'll have figured out that being sorry isn't the same as being different. She walked away. Quan sat alone in the visitation booth, watching her disappear. Even his mother had given up on him. Not angrily, just tiredly. The way you give up on a project that costs more energy than it's worth. Meanwhile, across the city, Roxy stood on stage at a women's leadership conference. 500 attendees. Cameras broadcasting to thousands online. The moderator asked the question everyone wanted answered. If you could go back and avoid the abuse, would you? Roxy looked at Nola, sitting with Titan in the front row, playing with blocks that cost more than most people's rent. No, she said clearly. Because going back means Nola doesn't exist. And my daughter is the best thing in my life. She's proof that beauty can grow from broken ground. If you had to choose between preventing your pain or keeping what came from it, which would you choose? This is the hardest question. Comment honestly. The audience was silent. Processing. Here's what I'd change, Roxy continued. I'd recognize the red flags faster. I'd trust my instincts instead of dismissing them. I'd leave the first time he made me feel small instead of waiting 3 years. She paused, but I wouldn't erase him from my history, because that experience taught me what real power looks like. Not control, not dominance, just the quiet ability to choose yourself even when someone's trying to convince you you're worthless. The audience erupted in applause. After the conference, Minji found Roxy backstage. That answer was perfect. It was honest. Same thing. Minji pulled out her tablet. I have updates. We just received approval for our 3rd location. And we have funding commitments for the next 5 years. Project Phoenix is officially sustainable. Roxy's throat tightened. We did it. You did it. I just helped. Minji smiled. Also, I have something for you. She handed Roxy an envelope. Inside, a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Dear Ms. Steele, my name is Jennifer Park. 2 years ago, I read an article about your escape from domestic abuse. At the time, I was planning to return to my husband despite knowing he'd hurt me again. Your story made me pause. I didn't leave immediately. It took another 8 months. But when I finally did, I remembered you said trust your instincts. So I did. I've been safe for 6 months now. I have a job, an apartment, peace. You saved my life before Project Phoenix even existed, just by surviving publicly, by refusing to let shame silence you. Thank you for being loud about what he tried to make you quiet about. With gratitude, Jennifer. Roxy read the letter 3 times, eyes burning. She's not the only one, Minji said quietly. I have 17 letters like that. Women who left abusive situations because they saw you survive and thought if she can, maybe I can. I didn't do anything special. You existed loudly. You refused to disappear. In a world that wants abuse victims to stay quiet and ashamed, you built a foundation and put your name on it. Minji's voice cracked slightly. That's revolutionary. That evening, Roxy returned to the Haven. Nola was already asleep. Titan had handled bedtime while Roxy was at the conference. Her brothers sat in the living room, reviewing security footage and business reports like the overprotective shadows they'd always been. Good event, Ghost asked without looking up from his laptop. Transformative. Roxy collapsed onto the couch. We're expanding to 3 cities. 5-year funding secured. And I have letters from women I've never met saying I helped them leave. Viper smiled. Rare and genuine. That's because you're a badass. I'm a survivor who got lucky, Roxy corrected. No. Titan closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. You're a survivor who chose to transform luck into infrastructure. There's a difference. Luck got you out. You built everything that came after. Silence fell, comfortable, familial. You know what's strange? Roxy said finally. I don't think about him anymore. Not with anger. Not with fear. Just indifference. He's a name in case files. Accancionarità. Nothing that affects my actual life. That's power, Ghost said quietly. When someone who once controlled everything becomes irrelevant to your happiness. Is he still? In prison, Viper confirmed. Good behavior. Might get parole in 3.5 years. But we have monitoring in place. If he comes within a mile of you or Nola, we'll know. I'm not worried. And Roxy meant it. He can't hurt me anymore. I'm not the woman he trapped. I'm not even the woman he threw away. I'm someone completely different. She looked around the Haven, her home, her sanctuary, her proof that safety could be self-created. I won, she said simply. You did, Titan agreed. Not the way he would have won. Not through destruction or dominance or revenge. I won by becoming someone he could never diminish again. Roxy stood, moving to the window overlooking Seorim. Somewhere out there, he's in a cell. And somewhere else, 127 women are sleeping safely because I turned my pain into their freedom. She pressed her palm against the cool glass. The scales didn't balance. They tipped entirely in my favor. Nola made a soft sound from the nursery, dreaming, safe, protected. Roxy smiled. Her daughter would grow up in a world where her mother had faced monsters and built kingdoms, where the steel name meant strength, not because it controlled through fear, but because it protected through love, where women learned early that power doesn't need permission. The empire rose. The phoenix flew. And Kwan's kingdom became nothing more than ashes beneath her feet. What's the most important lesson from Roxy's story? Drop your answer below. I want to know what stayed with you.